You don't realize it, but every day you are spending something far more valuable than money. You are spending your time, your attention, your emotional energy, and you are spending it on things that do not deserve even a single second of your life. You wake up in the morning already tired, not because your body is weak, but because your mind is exhausted. You scroll, you react, you overthink, you replay old conversations, you worry about things you can't control. You hand over your peace to people who don't even know the cost of what they are taking from you. You drain your energy on situations that add nothing to your growth. And by the time you need strength for yourself, you have nothing left to give. This is emotional spending, the most silent, most dangerous, most invisible way a person destroys their own life. Because when you waste money, you can earn it back. When you waste opportunities, sometimes another door opens. But when you waste time, when you waste energy, when you waste your emotional strength on the wrong things, it never returns the same way. You weaken your future without even noticing. You tell yourself you are thinking, but you are actually draining. You tell yourself you are caring, but you are actually sacrificing your peace for people who do not care in return. You tell yourself you are just trying to fix things, but the truth is you are burning your emotional fuel on problems that were never your responsibility. This audiobook is for you if you are tired of feeling drained, if you are tired of giving too much, if you are tired of being mentally exhausted by things that don't deserve space inside your heart. Every chapter you are about to hear is designed to help you stop emotional overspending. Not by becoming cold, not by becoming distant, not by becoming someone who feels nothing, but by becoming someone who finally understands the value of their emotional currency. Because your emotional energy is your life force, the quality of your life depends on where you invest it. You will see how emotional spending begins silently, like a slow leak in a pipe. How small reactions build into big stress. How little distractions rob your focus without mercy. How one negative person can drain the strength you need for an entire week. How one argument can steal the mental clarity required for your goals. How a single moment of overthinking can cost you hours of peace. And you will learn how to stop it. You will learn how to conserve your energy, how to protect your mental battery, how to redirect your time into things that actually matter. You will learn the psychology behind emotional fatigue, the habits that waste your strength, the triggers that turn small issues into emotional drama, and the systems that powerful people use to stay calm, focused, and disciplined. You will learn how to stop reacting to every noise around you, how to stop letting people live rent-free inside your mind, how to stop giving emotional attention to situations that deserve silence, how to stop pouring your heart into connections that only take and never give, how to stop thinking that every emotion requires action. You will learn how to build emotional boundaries, how to protect your peace, and how to make your mind a disciplined, controlled, empowered place where emotional spending happens only with intention. And slowly, you will see the difference. When you stop emotional overspending, everything changes. Your decisions become clearer, your relationships become healthier, your goals become sharper, your mind becomes steadier, your life becomes quieter, and that quietness becomes your strength. By the end of this audiobook, you will understand how to stop giving your time and energy away to everything that steals your inner balance. You will learn how to take back control, how to rebuild your emotional bank, how to invest your time wisely, how to protect your mental space with confidence, and how to create a life where your energy is spent only on the things that move you forward. And before we begin, make sure you subscribe to Prestige Audiobooks for daily new audiobooks on mindset, emotional discipline, inner strength, and personal mastery. Like, share, and comment to support the growth of this channel so more people can benefit from this journey of transformation. Let's begin. Chapter 1. The Cost of Emotional Overspending. You don't notice it at first. Emotional spending does not announce itself with loud alarms or blinking warnings. It begins quietly, almost harmlessly. A small irritation, an unnecessary reaction, a thought you should have ignored but entertained anyway. And without realizing it, you give away a piece of your mental energy, then another, then another. And suddenly you feel tired without doing anything physical. Your brain feels heavy, your chest feels tense, your focus slips, your patience shrinks, and you wonder why. This chapter is about the cost. What emotional overspending steals from you every single day? It is about the real price you pay when you let your attention, your reactions, your thoughts, and your feelings flow freely into situations that deserve none of them. Think about how many times you have spent your emotional energy on something that had no impact on your future. A small argument that ruined your entire mood. A message you overanalyzed for hours. A memory from years ago that resurfaced and drained you all over again. Someone's comment on social media that pulled you into an unnecessary spiral. A worry about something you can't control. A scenario you keep replaying even though it's over. This is emotional overspending. These are microtransactions of mental energy. And the worst part is that they feel small in the moment. But when they repeat every day, they drain you more than any physical effort ever could. You might think emotional exhaustion comes from big events, heartbreak, failure, loss. And yes, those things break you. But the real danger is in the small, constant leaks. The quiet drains you don't notice until you suddenly reach a breaking point and don't understand why your strength disappeared. Emotional overspending happens because the mind is wired to react. It wants to defend. It wants to analyze. It wants to fix. It wants to make sense of everything. But not everything deserves your emotional involvement. Not every situation requires your attention. Not every thought deserves to become a conversation inside your head. Not every person deserves space in your heart. Imagine your emotional energy as the battery level of your phone. Each reaction you give takes a percentage away. Every unnecessary worry drains a little more. Every argument that doesn't matter brings it down further. Every overthinking loop drops the charge again. And by the time you need full energy for something that matters to your life or goals, you are already running at 20%. You begin your day already behind. You try to work, but your mind feels scattered. You try to focus, but thoughts keep interrupting you. You try to relax, but your brain won't shut up. You try to enjoy your time, but emotional fatigue blocks the joy. You try to be productive, but mental clutter slows you down. Emotional overspending is not just a mental issue. It affects everything. Your time, your habits, your mood, your discipline, your relationships, your progress, your peace. When your emotional energy is low, you lose clarity. You start misreading situations. You take small things personally. You react to things you would normally ignore. You get annoyed more easily. You become impatient. You feel overwhelmed by tasks that are actually simple. You avoid responsibilities not because you are lazy, but because your emotional battery is empty. This is why emotional overspending is one of the biggest reasons people fail to improve their lives. Not because they lack skill or intelligence, but because they waste the mental energy required for growth before they even start growing. They are tired. You must understand that emotional strength is a currency, a limited one, and you spend it every time you invest your attention into something. Attention itself is investment. Where focus goes, energy flows, and where energy flows, your life grows or it dies. When you give your emotional strength to negativity, drama, conflict, unnecessary worry, you are feeding the very things that weaken you. How many times have you felt drained after talking to someone who only complains? How many times have you replayed an argument even after it ended? How many times have you stayed awake overthinking someone's opinion? How many times have you wasted hours on thoughts that did nothing for your future? How many times have you allowed one emotionally charged moment to destroy your entire day? That is emotional overspending. And the cost is not just energy, the cost is time. Time you could have used for growth, time you could have used for rest, time you could have used for your goals, time you could have used for the person you want to become. Time that will never return. Life becomes difficult not because it is actually hard, but because you enter every day emotionally poor. You wake up with debt, you start your morning with leftover stress from yesterday, you carry burdens that should have been released weeks ago, you think about people who shouldn't matter anymore, you protect relationships that no longer protect you, you try to fix things that cannot be fixed, you respond to situations that don't deserve a response. Emotional overspending is a habit, and like any habit, it becomes automatic. You react without thinking, you overthink without awareness, you stress without logic, you drain without control, you repeat patterns that harm you because you never learn to question them. Every time you say yes to something emotionally heavy, you say no to yourself. Every time you give attention to drama, you take attention away from your goals. Every time you let someone disturb your peace, you sacrifice the stability you need for growth. Every time you react instantly, you lose the power of emotional choice. But here is the truth many people never realize. Emotional strength doesn't get destroyed in one blow. It gets dismantled through thousands of micro-reactions. A glance, a memory, a sentence, a tone, a notification, a thought, a moment of insecurity, a moment of comparison, a moment of fear, a moment of doubt. These small things chip away at your emotional foundation until you become someone who feels exhausted all the time. But imagine what your life would look like if you stopped emotional overspending. Imagine if you kept your reactions under control. Imagine if you stopped giving energy to things that didn't deserve it. Imagine if you directed your emotional strength toward your goals instead of distractions. Imagine if your mind became a place of focus instead of chaos. You would feel lighter. You would feel clearer. You would feel stronger. You would feel more grounded. You would feel more in control of your life. You would stop letting small things break you. You would stop letting people drain you. You would stop letting your emotions run your day. The cost of emotional overspending is everything. Your peace, your creativity, your motivation, your discipline, your future. And that is why this audiobook exists, to show you how to stop paying this price, to help you conserve your energy, to help you protect your emotional resources, to help you regain control over the one thing that determines the direction of your entire life. Your inner state. Because when your mind becomes stable, your life becomes stable. When your emotions become disciplined, your actions become powerful. And when you stop giving your energy to the wrong places, your life begins to grow in the right direction. This is the foundation. This is where emotional discipline begins. Understanding the cost, seeing the damage, becoming aware of the leaks. Only then can you start repairing them. Chapter 2. Why your mind spends without permission. Before you can stop emotional overspending, you must understand why it happens. Why does your mind give away energy to the wrong thoughts? Why do you react before thinking? Why do you get drained by situations that shouldn't affect you? Why do you feel emotionally tired even on days when nothing major happens? The answer is simple. Your mind spends energy automatically, without permission, because it has never been trained to do otherwise. Most people believe they control their thoughts, but in reality, their thoughts control them. The mind is like a child holding a credit card. It doesn't know the value of what it is spending. It doesn't check the balance. It acts on impulse. It swipes emotionally. And you only realize the cost when the bill arrives in the form of stress, regret, emotional fatigue, or wasted time. This chapter takes you deeper into the psychology behind emotional overspending. It explains the silent habits, invisible instincts, and mental shortcuts that make your mind spend energy without asking you first. The mind is not naturally disciplined. It is naturally reactive. From the moment you wake up, your brain begins scanning for threats, comparisons, problems, and unresolved issues. It looks for things to solve. It looks for emotions to explore. It looks for drama to interpret. Not because you choose it, but because it is wired for survival, not peace. Your mind reacts to noise long before it reflects on meaning. Someone's tone changes, and you instantly begin analyzing it. You see a message, and before understanding it, your emotions respond. You remember a past mistake and instantly feel the shame again. You hear about someone's success, and your mind automatically compares. You imagine a future scenario and suddenly feel fear, even though nothing has happened. Your mind does this because it has been programmed over years of repetition. Every emotional reaction you allowed in the past became a blueprint. Every moment of overthinking became a pattern. Every unnecessary worry became a habit. The mind learned that reacting is normal and ignoring is unusual. It learned that emotional involvement is automatic and emotional restraint is optional. This is why emotional overspending feels natural. You have done it for so long that it has become your default response. Another reason the mind spends energy without your permission is because it hates empty space. Silence makes it uncomfortable. Stillness makes it restless. The mind wants stimulation, even if that stimulation drains you. It wants to chew on thoughts, even if those thoughts hurt you. It wants to feel something, even if what it feels is stress. This is why people check their phones the moment they are alone. This is why they replay old conversations. This is why they create imaginary scenarios. This is why they try to fix things that are not broken. This is why they worry about things that may never happen. The mind does not like stillness. It would rather stay busy with emotional chaos than be quiet with emotional clarity. And that constant activity drains you, sometimes in ways you don't recognize. Then there is another force at work, emotional triggers. These are the hidden buttons inside your mind that instantly pull your energy toward a reaction. A certain tone, a certain phrase, a certain memory, a certain situation. Something happens, and suddenly you feel a rush of emotion, even if the moment itself is harmless. Once triggered, the mind begins overspending like water spilling from a broken tap. The emotional leak begins. Suddenly, what could have been a simple moment becomes an emotional event. This is not weakness, it is conditioning. The mind learned to react long before you learn to control it. Another major reason for emotional overspending is the fear of being wrong, losing control, or being misunderstood. Many people spend hours replaying conversations because they fear they said the wrong thing. They spend emotional energy worrying about how others see them. They waste time imagining what someone might think. They drain themselves trying to manage impressions instead of managing their mind. This social anxiety is emotional spending disguised as responsibility. This fear makes you overspend in subtle ways. You respond to messages instantly even when you're tired. You explain yourself too much. You engage in arguments you should walk away from. You hold on to relationships that drain you because the thought of losing them scares you. You give emotional effort to people who don't appreciate it because you are afraid of disappointing them. Your energy is spent not on growth but on fear. Another hidden cause of emotional overspending is unresolved wounds. The more pain you carry from past experiences, the more mentally expensive your present becomes. When old wounds remain open, every situation touches them. Even small events feel heavy. Minor conflicts feel personal. Neutral comments feel like attacks. Simple issues feel complicated. Your mind overspends because it is not reacting to the present. It is reacting to the past. The inner child inside you, the part of you that felt abandoned, ignored, judged, or hurt, still tries to protect itself. It uses emotional energy to defend itself from threats that no longer exist. It looks for signs of betrayal. It fears rejection. It questions people's intentions. It anticipates disappointment. This unconscious fear makes small things feel big, which drains far more energy than necessary. Another reason the mind spends without permission is the lack of emotional boundaries. Most people do not know how to say no to emotional requests. Someone calls you to complain for an hour, and you listen even though it drains you. Someone asks you to fix their problems, and you jump in even though you don't have energy. Someone pulls you into their drama, and you try to resolve it, even though it is not your responsibility. You overspend because you lack boundaries that protect your emotional wallet. Then comes comparison, one of the biggest emotional expenses of modern life. You scroll through social media, see other people's successes, lifestyles, bodies, achievements, and your mind begins calculating your worth based on their highlight reels. This comparison steals your peace. It drains your confidence. It wastes emotional energy on things that have nothing to do with your purpose. You were not meant to live your life constantly comparing it to others, but the world around you pushes you into that trap every day, and every moment you spend comparing, you lose emotional strength you could have invested in your own growth. But perhaps the deepest reason your mind overspends emotionally is because it never learned the difference between reacting and responding. Reacting is automatic. Responding is intentional. Reacting is emotional. Responding is logical. Reacting drains energy. Responding saves it. Reacting gives control to the moment. Responding gives control to you. But in order to respond, you must learn awareness. You must learn to see your thoughts without obeying them. You must learn to feel emotions without acting on them. You must learn to pause before you spend your energy. You must learn to evaluate before investing attention. Right now, your mind spends first and thinks later. That is why your emotions feel expensive. That is why your energy feels limited. That is why your days feel heavy. The mind also overspends because it keeps trying to solve unsolvable things. It tries to fix people you cannot change. It tries to understand situations that have no logic. It tries to control outcomes that depend on others. It tries to predict the future even though the future doesn't exist yet. All of this is emotional labor, and none of it produces results. Your mind overspends because it wants certainty. It wants assurance. It wants everything to make sense. But life rarely gives perfect answers, and when you chase answers where none exist, you end up draining energy that you should have saved. The final reason the mind overspends is because you have never measured the cost. You don't realize how much energy thoughts require. You don't see emotional spending as dangerous because it feels invisible. But the consequences are very real. Over time, your emotional battery weakens, your resilience drops, your motivation fades, your discipline collapses, your relationships strain, your goals slow down, your peace disappears. Understanding why emotional overspending happens is the first step to stopping it, because once you see the mechanisms clearly, you gain power over them. You learn to pause before reacting. You learn to question thoughts before believing them. You learn to redirect attention. You learn to protect your emotional wallet. Awareness is the beginning of emotional discipline. Once you see the leaks, you can fix them. Once you understand the triggers, you can manage them. Once you take control of your attention, you take control of your energy. And once you take control of your energy, you take control of your life. Chapter 3. How small emotional leaks drain your entire life. Most people think emotional exhaustion comes from big events. A breakup, a major failure, a difficult period, a toxic relationship, a financial crisis, and yes, those moments can break a person. But what truly drains you daily is not the storm. It is the slow leak, the invisible drip, the tiny emotional openings you never seal because you believe they are too small to matter. But emotional leaks are never small. Small leaks sink large ships. Tiny cracks break solid foundations. Drop by drop, energy escapes, as sea sees, strength fades, and resilience thins. You don't collapse because of one overwhelming event. You collapse because of hundreds of little drains you never paid attention to. This chapter exposes those leaks, the ones that steal your time, the ones that steal your focus, the ones that steal your peace, and the ones that hold your life hostage without you even realizing it. You wake up in the morning, your phone buzzes, a message, a notification, a reminder, a social media alert. You check it. Something you didn't need to see. Someone's opinion, someone's post, a small irritation, a comment you interpret the wrong way. You don't react loudly, but inside, something shifts. A small drop of emotional energy slips away. That is the first leak of your day. Then you move through your morning. You think about the work waiting for you. You remember something you forgot to do yesterday. Another leak. You recall an awkward moment from last week. Leak. You think about someone who annoyed you. Leak. You check your phone again and compare yourself to someone else. Leak. You imagine a conversation you might have later and worry how it will go. Leak. Before your day truly begins, you have already spent 50% of your emotional battery. And nothing went wrong. Nothing major happened. Just micro leaks draining you one small moment at a time. Most people don't realize how dangerous these micro moments are. They think emotional pain comes in big waves, but it actually comes in tiny grains, hundreds of them every single day. You tell yourself these grains don't matter, but they pile up like sandbags on your chest, and slowly you feel tired for no reason. These are the leaks that steal your life. You see something online you didn't need to see. Leak. You replay a moment from the past. Leak. You imagine something that hasn't happened yet. Leak. You take someone's tone personally. Leak. You respond to a negative message. Leak. You scroll unconsciously and feel inferior. Leak. You worry about someone's opinion. Leak. You get pulled into someone else's drama. Leak. You try to please a person you don't even like. Leak. You try to control a situation outside your control. Leak. Every leak feels small, but together they drain everything. This is why you feel exhausted even when nothing huge has happened. Emotional exhaustion is the debt created by continuous leaking. Imagine carrying a bucket of water across a field. The bucket has tiny holes. Water drips out constantly. You walk slowly, carefully, giving your best effort. But by the time you reach the end, the bucket is nearly empty. Not because you failed, not because you were weak, not because the task was impossible, but because your bucket leaked along the way. This is your life. This is your emotional energy. This is the reason your goals feel harder than they should. Not because the goals are difficult, but because you reach them with an empty, emotional bucket. Your mind has been spending energy on distractions long before you spend energy on your dreams. And the worst part? The leaks feel normal. They feel harmless. They feel like everyday moments. You don't see the damage because the damage is too quiet. Think about this. You check your phone and see someone's achievement. Suddenly you feel behind. You feel slow. You feel inadequate. You don't say anything. You don't cry. You don't show emotion. But inside, your energy drops by 30% instantly. This is a silent leak. Or you remember someone who hurt you years ago. A memory comes up while you're drinking tea or sitting alone. You don't break down, you don't cry, but your chest tightens for a second. Your mood shifts. Your energy drains. Another leak. Or you imagine a future situation that scares you. Something that hasn't happened. Something that might not happen. Something you have no control over. But your mind creates the scene like a movie. Your body reacts as if it is real. Your emotions respond. Your heart beats faster. Your thoughts spiral. Leak. These leaks are the reason your emotional battery is always low. They drain your capacity to live, to focus, to grow, to love, to rest. You think you need more motivation, more discipline, more inspiration, but what you actually need is fewer leaks. Because no amount of motivation can fill a leaking emotional bucket. People waste years trying to build discipline while ignoring the silent leaks killing their energy every day. They blame themselves for lack of focus when the real problem is lack of emotional boundaries. They tell themselves they are lazy when the truth is they are drained. They believe their mind is weak when in reality their energy is being stolen by small, unhealed leaks. Let's talk about one of the biggest emotional leaks: unnecessary reactions. You don't need to emotionally respond to everything. You don't need to react to every comment, every tone, every opinion, every situation. But the mind does it automatically. Someone disagrees with you. Leak. Someone ignores you. Leak. Someone speaks rudely. Leak. Someone misunderstands you. Leak. You think defending yourself will make you feel better. But in reality, reacting drains far more energy than staying silent ever could. Another major leak is overthinking things that don't matter. You overthink what people meant. You overthink what people said. You overthink what might happen. You overthink how others see you. Overthinking is the mental version of leaving your car lights on overnight. In the morning, the battery is dead, not because the car is broken, but because the energy leaked away while you weren't paying attention. You also leak energy through unfinished emotional business. You avoid conversations you need to have. You avoid decisions you need to make. You hold on to people you should have let go long ago. You carry emotional weight from your past that should have been released years earlier. Every delay drains you. Every avoidance drains you. Every memory you refuse to process drains you. Another enormous leak is people-pleasing. When you spend your emotional energy trying to make others comfortable, you silently abandon yourself. You sacrifice your peace for approval. You trade your energy for temporary acceptance. You drain your emotional wallet because you don't want anyone to be disappointed. But every person you try to please takes a piece of you. Then there are the leaks created by comparison. You compare your life to people who are not even in the same chapter as you. You compare your progress to someone else's highlight moment. You compare your growth to someone else's advantage, and you feel smaller each time. Each comparison is a leak, a slow poison, a constant drain. It steals your joy, your confidence, your steadiness, your self-worth. Another leak comes from absorbing other people's emotions. Someone else is angry, and you absorb it. Someone else is stressed, and you carry it. Someone else is anxious, and you feel responsible. Someone else complains, and you hold their pain as if it's yours. This emotional absorption drains you in ways that physical work never could. You cannot carry everyone. You cannot fix everyone. You cannot heal everyone. You cannot solve everyone's problems. But emotional overspenders try anyway, and it eats their energy alive. There are leaks created by perfectionism. When you expect yourself to do everything perfectly, you spend emotional energy on unnecessary pressure. You want your words perfect, your actions perfect, your results perfect. But life is never perfect, and achieving perfection requires the emotional strength you don't have because leaks have already drained you. There are leaks created by conversations that start innocently but turn emotionally expensive. You talk to someone whose presence drains you. Their negativity, their drama, their complaints, their bitterness, all of it pulls your emotions downward. You keep listening out of politeness, but your energy leaks with every minute. And then there are leaks created by lack of boundaries with yourself. You allow yourself to think thoughts that hurt you. You allow yourself to dwell on memories that damage you. You allow yourself to create imaginary scenarios that terrify you. You allow your mind to run freely without ever asking, is this worth my energy? Most people protect their money better than their emotions. They check bank balances but not emotional balances. They monitor expenses but not emotional costs. They avoid financial debt but live in emotional debt every day. You must understand this truth with clarity. Emotional leaks are not harmless. They destroy your energy, your focus, your discipline, your progress, your peace. They keep you stuck in cycles of exhaustion. They stop you from becoming the person you are meant to be. When you seal these leaks, your life will change drastically. Suddenly you will have emotional energy for the things that matter. Your goals will become easier. Your mind will feel calmer. Your relationships will improve. Your productivity will increase. Your stress will decrease. Your discipline will feel natural instead of forced. Your emotional battery will finally hold a full charge. And once you get used to living with a full emotional battery, you will never again tolerate the things that drain you. Chapter 4. The emotional budget you never knew you needed. Every person has a financial budget, or at least the idea of one. You know you cannot spend more money than you earn. You know you cannot swipe your card endlessly without consequences. You know every purchase has a cost, and at the end of the month, everything must add up. But emotionally, most people behave as if the rules don't apply. They spend their mental energy as if it is unlimited. They react to everything. They think about everything. They stress about everything. They involve themselves in everything. They entertain every emotion, every thought, every fear, every worry without questioning the price. This is why life feels heavier than it should, because without an emotional budget, you live in constant emotional bankruptcy. This chapter teaches you something you should have been taught long ago. Your emotions need a budget. Your attention needs a budget. Your reactions need a budget. Your time needs a budget. Without one, you will continue to drain yourself, break yourself, and wonder why you feel so tired all the time. Imagine that every morning you wake up with a limited amount of emotional currency. Think of it like a wallet filled with a specific amount of mental energy. This energy is supposed to be used wisely during the day for your goals, your health, your relationships, your peace, your responsibilities, your progress. But because you don't have an emotional budget, the first people to take from your wallet are not the ones who deserve it. They are the distractions, the overthinking, the worries, the memories, the fears, the people who drain you, the conversations that don't matter, the problems that aren't yours, the tasks that can wait, the notifications that shouldn't exist. By noon, your wallet is empty. Not because your day was hard, but because you spent your energy on things that were cheap. The truth is simple: life does not drain you. Your unfiltered emotional spending does. Without an emotional budget, your mind becomes like a house with open doors. Anything can walk in. Anyone can disturb you. Any emotion can invade. Any thought can control you. Any situation can pull you in. This is why your emotional world feels chaotic. You have no boundaries guarding the entrance. An emotional budget gives you structure. It helps you decide what deserves energy and what doesn't. It teaches you to spend intentionally, not impulsively. It helps you conserve strength for things that matter instead of wasting it on things that don't. But before you can create a budget, you have to understand your expenses. You have emotional costs everywhere in your day. Some obvious, some hidden, some extremely expensive, some surprisingly cheap but frequent. For example, arguments are expensive. They drain you quickly. Worry is expensive. It steals your peace. Overthinking is expensive. It consumes hours. Trying to control everything is expensive. It burns energy without results. Being around negative people is expensive. They drain you silently. Carrying past pain is expensive. It uses energy your present needs. On the other hand, tasks like drinking water, taking a walk, organizing your space, reading something uplifting, taking a short break, these are emotionally inexpensive and often give more energy than they cost. But without awareness, you treat everything the same. You give the same emotional effort to something useless as you give to something important. You react to small inconveniences with the same intensity as major problems. You spend emotional currency on strangers online as much as you spend on people you actually care about. You waste emotional energy on situations far outside your influence while ignoring the places where your energy could make a real difference. This imbalance is the reason you feel mentally poor. You must understand that your emotional energy is more valuable than money. You can lose money and earn it back. But if you lose emotional energy, you lose time, clarity, motivation, self-control, and performance. Emotional bankruptcy has consequences far deeper than financial bankruptcy. You cannot think clearly. You cannot work efficiently. You cannot love fully. You cannot make good decisions. You cannot stay consistent. You cannot move forward. Your life freezes when your emotional energy runs out, even if you still have physical energy left. The emotional budget teaches you something most people never realize. Not everything deserves your reaction. Not everything deserves a response. Not everything deserves a thought. Not everything deserves attention. Not everything deserves a place in your heart. Chew. Your emotions are not free. Your reactions are not free. Your attention is not free. Every act of emotional spending costs you something. So, start looking at your day like a financial analyst examining expenses. Where does your energy go every morning? What drains you before you even begin your actual tasks? Who takes your emotional energy without returning anything? What thoughts come into your mind that you don't know how to stop? What memories show up that drain your present? What worries appear repeatedly even though nothing happened yet? What parts of your routine cost too much emotionally? When you begin observing, you will notice something surprising. Most of your emotional spending goes toward things you do not even value. You spend energy thinking about people who don't think about you. You spend energy worrying about situations that never actually happen. You spend energy replaying conversations you cannot change. You spend energy trying to impress people who don't matter. You spend energy checking your phone out of habit, not purpose. You spend energy carrying guilt that isn't yours. You spend energy apologizing for things you shouldn't apologize for. You spend energy trying to fix people who aren't ready to change. Imagine how much stronger you would be if all that energy returned to you. An emotional budget forces you to decide what is worth spending on and what must be cut off. It forces you to ask questions like, does this deserve my reaction? Does this deserve my worry? Does this deserve my time? Does this deserve my focus? Does this deserve a place in my emotional world? Does this move me forward or drain me? Is this my responsibility or someone else's? Is this helping me or hurting me? Most of the time, the answer will shock you. You will realize that at least 70% of your emotional spending is useless. It doesn't help your peace. It doesn't improve your life. It doesn't contribute to your goals. It only drains you. And once you see this clearly, you can begin restructuring your emotional world. You create rules. You prioritize. You cut off expenses. You protect your energy like something precious. Because it is. You begin saying no to conversations that drain you. You begin avoiding arguments that lead nowhere. You begin walking away from negativity. You begin ignoring things that never deserved your attention. You begin releasing people who do not respect your emotional space. You begin taking responsibility for your own energy instead of giving it away freely. You begin living like someone who knows the value of their emotional currency. This shift changes everything. Suddenly, your mind feels quieter. Your reactions become calmer. Your days feel lighter. You have more energy to work on things that matter. You feel more control over your emotions. You are not exhausted by noon. You have strength left for your goals, your dreams, your relationships, and your growth. You stop living like a mental debtor and start living like someone who is emotionally rich. And this richness does not come from meditation or motivation or inspiration. It comes from discipline, emotional discipline. The discipline of choosing where to spend, when to spend, how much to spend, and when to save. You learn to stop yourself before reacting. You learn to pause before panicking. You learn to evaluate before engaging. You learn to pull back when something is draining you. You learn to reserve your emotional energy for things that truly matter. This is the emotional budget you never knew you needed. A system that protects your energy, stabilizes your mind, and rebuilds your inner strength. Once you live this way, once you understand emotional budgeting, once you experience the peace that comes from intentional spending, you will never return to the chaotic, emotional lifestyle you had before. Your mind becomes clear. Your heart becomes steady. Your reactions become controlled. Your priorities become sharp. Your life becomes peaceful. Because emotional budgeting is not about becoming cold. It is about becoming wise. Chapter 5. The Dangerous Comfort of Emotional Waste. There is a strange truth about emotional overspending that people rarely admit to themselves. It feels comfortable, not healthy, not helpful, not supportive, but familiar and strangely comforting. This comfort is one of the biggest reasons people waste their emotional energy every day without even realizing it. They are addicted to the emotional patterns that drain them. This chapter dives deep into that hidden comfort, the comfort of worrying, the comfort of overthinking, the comfort of replaying memories, the comfort of complaining, the comfort of reacting, the comfort of being emotionally messy, the comfort of chaos. Even though chaos destroys your peace, a part of you might cling to it because it feels normal. You've lived in it for so long that peace feels uncomfortable, calmness feels unfamiliar, silence feels threatening, stillness feels unnerving. Emotional discipline feels too difficult because emotional waste feels too easy. This is the dangerous comfort that slowly eats away your life. Think about it. When you overthink, you feel like you're doing something. You feel mentally active. You feel like you're figuring it out. But in reality, you're wasting your emotional energy solving imaginary problems. Overthinking feels productive, but it is emotional spending disguised as effort. Or take worrying. Worrying feels like preparation. You feel like you're protecting yourself from future problems. But worry does not prevent anything. It drains you before anything actually happens. Your mind becomes tired from handling problems that don't exist yet. And because you've worried for years, it feels natural. Worrying becomes your comfort zone. Or take complaining. It gives temporary relief. You feel heard, you feel understood, you feel validated. But complaining doesn't fix anything. It only gives you a small emotional reward while draining your long-term emotional strength. It becomes a habit, a pattern your mind relies on to release stress, even though it keeps you trapped in emotional debt. Another dangerous comfort is revisiting old memories, even painful ones, even the ones that broke you. Your mind goes back to the past because it is familiar. You replay old conversations, old betrayals, old heartbreaks, old failures. You relive moments that no longer exist. It doesn't help you, but it feels easier than facing the unknown present or the uncertain future. So you emotionally overspend on what cannot be changed. And then there is the comfort of reacting. When someone triggers you, reacting gives you a momentary sense of power. You feel in control, you feel justified, you feel alive. But afterward, your emotional energy collapses. You feel exhausted, you feel guilty, you feel drained. Yet the next time it happens, you react again, because reacting is easier than restraining yourself. This comfort zone is dangerous. Feeling something, anything, even if it's negative, becomes more comfortable than feeling nothing. Chaos becomes a habit. Emotional waste becomes routine. This comfort keeps you from growth. Growth feels uncomfortable because it requires discipline, it requires pausing, it requires silence, it requires thought management, it requires emotional control, it requires change, and change requires energy. But if your energy is constantly leaking due to emotional overspending, growth feels like a mountain you cannot climb. Comfort keeps you stuck. Your mind loves familiarity, even if that familiarity hurts, even if it drains you, even if it costs your peace. This is why people stay in situations that make them unhappy. This is why they hold on to people who drain them. This is why they remain in cycles that harm them. The mind prefers predictable pain over unpredictable peace. Emotional waste is predictable. It feels normal. You know what to expect. But peace is new. Calmness is new. Discipline is new. Silence is new. And the mind fears what is new. This is why emotional overspending continues. Not because you want to waste energy, but because you don't know how to live without the emotional patterns you've trained yourself into. Let's break this down. You overthink because it gives you the illusion of control. It feels like you're preparing, but really you're exhausting your mind. You worry because it feels responsible. It makes you feel like you care, but really you're draining yourself for no reason. You revisit the past because it feels safe to go somewhere familiar, but really you're reopening old wounds that should have healed. You complain because it temporarily releases pressure, but really you're just reinforcing negativity and wasting energy. You react emotionally because it feels immediate and satisfying, but really you're paying the price afterward with guilt, stress, and fatigue. Your emotional comfort zone is not comfortable. It's just familiar. And familiarity is powerful. The brain prefers familiar discomfort over unfamiliar effort. This is why people repeat the same emotional mistakes over and over again. They know it's hurting them, they know it's draining them, they know it's wasting their time, but they keep doing it because it's what they know. You must understand something crucial. Emotional overspending is a lifestyle, not an accident. It is a learned behavior that becomes so automatic, you don't even question it anymore. And when something becomes automatic, your brain assumes it is normal. But it is not normal to be tired all the time. It is not normal to react to everything. It is not normal to live with constant anxiety. It is not normal to carry emotional weight every day. It is not normal to be mentally drained before noon. It is not normal to feel like you have no energy left for yourself. These are the symptoms of emotional overspending. And the root of it is the comfort you find in emotional waste. So, how do you break out of this comfort zone? First, you must become aware of your emotional habits. You must catch yourself when you start to overspend. When you begin to overthink, notice it. When you start worrying unnecessarily, stop yourself. When you tweet or text out of emotion, pause. When you feel triggered, breathe first. When old memories come up, ask yourself why they matter now. When you feel drawn into someone's negativity, step back. You cannot change what you aren't aware of. Awareness is the first step toward emotional discipline. The second step is learning to sit with silence. Silence is uncomfortable for those who have spent years drowning in emotional noise. But silence is necessary. Silence helps you create mental structure. Silence helps you see your thoughts clearly. Silence helps you understand where your emotional spending comes from. Without silence, your mind will continue its automatic spending cycles forever. The third step is learning emotional boundaries. You must stop giving your energy to people or situations that haven't earned it. You must protect your emotional wallet the same way you protect your money. Not everyone deserves to know your feelings. Not every comment deserves a reaction. Not every problem deserves your involvement. Not every thought deserves space in your mind. Not every emotion deserves expression. Save your energy for things that matter. The fourth step is learning to delay emotional reactions. When something triggers you, pause. Don't respond immediately. Don't engage. Don't react. Wait. Emotions are like waves. If you let the wave pass, clarity follows. Immediate reactions are emotional spending. Delayed responses are emotional investing. And the fifth step is teaching your mind a new definition of comfort. Your new comfort must become peace, not chaos. Stillness, not drama. Focus, not distraction. Discipline, not reaction. At first, this new comfort will feel strange. You will feel restless. You will feel bored. You will feel uncomfortable. That is normal. You have lived inside emotional noise for so long that silence feels foreign. But the more you practice emotional discipline, the more natural it becomes. And soon, the comfort that once came from chaos will be replaced by the comfort that comes from control. When emotional waste is no longer your comfort, emotional discipline becomes your strength. You begin to see life differently. You begin to feel lighter. You begin to breathe easier. You begin to think clearly. You begin to respond intentionally. You begin to handle situations with calmness. You begin to protect your energy without guilt. This is freedom, the freedom that comes from breaking emotional patterns that once ruled your life. Chapter 6. Small Savings, Big Energy, How Microcontrol Builds Emotional Power. Most people believe emotional strength comes from major breakthroughs. A life-changing decision, a dramatic shift, a bold transformation, something big, something powerful, something loud. But emotional strength doesn't work that way. Life doesn't give you huge victories without testing you through small ones. And emotional discipline doesn't come from giant moments, it comes from microcontrol. Small savings, small decisions, small pauses, small choices, small boundaries, small acts of saying no to emotional noise and yes to clarity. These are the building blocks of emotional power. This chapter is about those tiny decisions that seem insignificant but transform your life when they accumulate over time. Just like financial savings, emotional savings compound. And when they compound, they create stability, clarity, discipline, and strength you never imagined possible. The mistake most people make is waiting for a huge moment to change their life. They want one powerful decision that will fix everything. But life doesn't give you one big opportunity. It gives you 1,000 small ones every day, hidden inside your reactions, your thoughts, your routines, your triggers, your responses. Emotional power is built in the moments you don't notice. The moment you ignore a message instead of reacting instantly. The moment you choose silence instead of confrontation. The moment you walk away from someone's negativity instead of absorbing it. The moment you stop overthinking and redirect your focus. The moment you decide to protect your morning from emotional chaos. The moment you take a deep breath before responding to something stressful. The moment you stop yourself from replaying an old memory. The moment you decide not to open a conversation that will drain you. The moment you cut off a small worry before it turns into a storm. These micro savings build you. They remove emotional leaks before they become floods. Imagine someone trying to save money. They skip a small, unnecessary purchase. It seems insignificant, but they do it every day. Over a month, it grows. Over a year, it becomes meaningful. Over years, it becomes life-changing. Emotional savings work the same way. One controlled reaction doesn't seem like much. One avoided argument doesn't seem like much. One ignored distraction doesn't seem like much. One moment of silence doesn't seem like much. One skipped overthinking cycle doesn't seem like much. But accumulated, they transform your emotional world. They rebuild your emotional battery. They create mental peace that feels powerful and unstoppable. This is the secret emotionally strong people know. Strength is built in the quiet choices, not the dramatic ones. Let's break down the small areas where emotional energy usually leaks, and how small savings instantly boost your power. One of the biggest areas of emotional leakage is mornings. The first hour of your day determines the emotional cost of the rest of the day. If you wake up and immediately expose your mind to negativity, comparison, stress, or distraction, you spend half your emotional budget before breakfast. But saving energy in the morning is simple. Instead of reaching for your phone, you wait. Instead of checking messages, you breathe. Instead of jumping into responsibilities, you ground yourself. This tiny change saves emotional energy for later challenges. Another micro-saving is avoiding unnecessary explanations. You don't have to justify everything. You don't have to convince people. You don't have to prove yourself. You don't have to explain your choices to those who don't understand you. Every explanation is emotional labor. Cutting unnecessary ones saves more energy than you realize. Then there are micro-savings in how you consume information. You don't need to check every post. You don't need to read every comment. You don't need to watch every update. You don't need to absorb every piece of negativity around you. Choosing what enters your mind is a micro-saving that protects your emotional clarity. Micro-control also applies to emotional triggers. A trigger is an invitation to overspend emotionally, but you don't have to accept every invitation. You can learn to pause when something irritates you. You can learn to breathe instead of react. You can choose to walk away instead of argue. You can decide that not every moment deserves your emotional involvement. Every time you pause, you save energy. Every time you choose not to react, you strengthen yourself. Every time you break a trigger response pattern, you grow emotionally wealthier. Another micro-saving happens in conversations. Some conversations drain you. Some conversations lead nowhere. Some conversations are meant to pull you into emotional drama, but you don't have to attend every conversation you're invited to. You don't have to discuss everything. You don't have to engage in emotional battles that don't affect your life. Choosing silence is emotional saving. Leaving some conversations incomplete is emotional saving. Walking away from someone's chaos is emotional saving. Another important micro-saving: refusing to carry other people's emotions. You are not responsible for everyone's anger. You are not responsible for everyone's sadness. You are not responsible for everyone's insecurity. You are not responsible for everyone's drama. You are not responsible for everyone's problems. And to know, you can care without carrying. You can listen without absorbing. You can support without sacrificing your peace. This boundary is a micro-saving that protects your emotional core. Let's talk about overthinking. Overthinking is emotional bankruptcy. One thought becomes 1,000. One question becomes a paralysis. One memory becomes a storm. One insecurity becomes a crisis. But overthinking can be interrupted. When the first thought arrives, redirect your attention. When the first doubt appears, question it instead of spiraling. When the movie of what if begins playing, stop the screen. One interruption prevents hundreds of emotional expenses. Another micro-saving hides in avoidance of self-criticisms. Many people drain themselves with internal attacks. They judge themselves harshly. They criticize their decisions. They hold themselves hostage to impossible standards. They punish themselves for mistakes. They drain emotional energy through self-blame. But saving energy here requires one small shift: self-compassion, allowing yourself humanity, allowing yourself error, allowing yourself to be imperfect. This doesn't make you weak, it makes you emotionally efficient. Another powerful micro-saving is learning to say the word no. Not angrily, not dramatically, just calmly. No to requests that drain you. No to commitments that exhaust you. No to people who take without giving. No to tasks that overload you. A simple no saves huge amounts of emotional energy. Then there are micro-savings in how you manage expectations. Expecting too much from people drains your emotional energy when they fail you. Expecting everything to go smoothly drains you when life becomes unpredictable. Expecting perfection from yourself drains you when you fall short. Managing expectations allows you to conserve emotional strength. Small expectations, small disappointments, small reactions, small drains. The secret to emotional strength is reducing the size of your emotional leaks. Another area of micro-saving is gratitude. Gratitude is not just a positive emotion. It is emotional protection. When you focus on what's working, your mind stops wasting energy on what's not. Gratitude shifts your emotional spending from negative to positive investment. One moment of gratitude can save hours of emotional stress. Another crucial micro-saving is staying present. Most emotional waste comes from living in the past or the future. The past drains you with old wounds. The future drains you with fear. The present is where your emotional energy belongs. Being here, now, with what you can control. Presence is emotional efficiency. These small choices build emotional strength over time. They don't feel dramatic. They don't feel powerful. They don't feel life-changing in the moment. But over weeks, months, and years, they redefine your emotional world. You stop being tired all the time. You stop feeling overwhelmed by small things. You stop spiraling into emotional chaos. You stop engaging with negativity. You stop reacting impulsively. You stop losing energy to useless thoughts. You stop living in emotional debt. You begin living with energy. You begin living with clarity. You begin living with intention. You begin living with emotional wealth. Emotional strength is not built in big moments. It is built in micro moments. If you control those, you control your life. Chapter 7. Training consistency in your emotional world. People talk about consistency in physical habits. They talk about consistency in work, in exercise, in routines, in discipline. But very few talk about consistency in emotional behavior. And yet, emotional consistency is the foundation of everything else. Without emotional stability, you cannot be consistent in anything else. You cannot stay focused. You cannot stay disciplined. You cannot stay productive. You cannot stay peaceful. You cannot stay committed. This chapter is about training emotional consistency, how to make your emotions reliable instead of unpredictable, steady instead of erratic, intentional instead of chaotic. When you stop emotional overspending, consistency becomes possible. But when you train emotional consistency, emotional overspending becomes almost impossible. Most people think emotional consistency means ignoring emotions or suppressing them, but it's the opposite. Emotional consistency means understanding your emotional limits, managing your emotional responses, and protecting your emotional energy every day, not just when life is calm. Consistency comes from habits, and emotional habits are built just like physical ones, through repetition, structure, and awareness. The first truth you must understand is this: emotions are unpredictable, but reactions are not. You cannot control everything you feel, but you can always control how you respond. This is where emotional consistency begins, not in perfect feelings, but in consistent reactions. Think about how a small emotional trigger can derail your entire day. A rude message, a bad memory, a small inconvenience, a moment of insecurity. If you don't train emotional consistency, tiny triggers become huge reactions. Your mood drops, your energy drains, your focus collapses, your day derails. Training consistency means building the ability to stay steady even when emotions fluctuate. It means you don't let every feeling become a crisis. You don't let every thought become a distraction. You don't let every situation become an emotional event. Consistency is built through manageable emotional routines. It's not about being unshakable. It's about being stable enough that life's small disruptions don't break you every day. The first step to training consistency is recognizing emotional patterns. Most emotional reactions repeat themselves. The same things trigger you. The same situations drain you. The same habits distract you. The same thoughts derail you. But because you've never observed these patterns, you think each reaction is random. It is not random. Emotional reactions are predictable when you know your patterns. For example, if you always feel anxious when you wake up and check your phone, that is a predictable pattern. If you always feel drained after talking to a certain person, that is a pattern. If you always overthink at night, that is a pattern. If certain words, tones, or situations trigger you every time, these are not coincidences, they are patterns. Emotional consistency begins with recognizing patterns and preparing for them. Preparing doesn't mean eliminating emotions, it means managing the emotional cost before the reaction happens. For instance, if checking messages first thing in the morning always ruins your mood, emotional consistency means changing that habit. If certain people always drain you, emotional consistency means limiting access. If certain thoughts always spiral into overthinking, emotional consistency means cutting them off early. You train consistency by designing emotional habits that protect you from chaos. Another crucial part of emotional consistency is building what I call minimum emotional standards. Just like minimum physical habits, like drinking water or brushing your teeth, you must create minimum emotional practices that keep you grounded every day. These standards don't have to be complicated. They can be simple, repetitive, and easy to maintain. For example, a minimum standard of not reacting instantly when triggered, a minimum standard of taking a brief pause before responding, a minimum standard of avoiding certain conversations when tired, a minimum standard of not checking your phone first thing in the morning, a minimum standard of stepping away when overwhelmed, a minimum standard of protecting your evenings from emotional stress. These small standards create emotional structure. They make your reactions more consistent because your responses become habits instead of impulses. The next step in training consistency is emotional tracking. Most people track their physical habits, steps, calories, tasks, routines. They track their progress, but emotional progress is rarely tracked, and this is why emotional patterns stay invisible. Emotional tracking doesn't require writing long journal entries or analyzing every feeling. It simply means noticing when your energy rises, when it falls, what causes emotional drains, what triggers stress, and what brings calm. When you track these consistently, you begin to understand your emotional economy. You recognize which emotional investments are profitable and which are draining. You begin to choose your emotional responses like someone wisely managing money. Tracking makes you emotionally conscious, and consciousness leads to consistency. Another part of training, emotional consistency, is learning emotional pacing. Emotional overspending usually comes from reacting intensely in moments that don't deserve intensity. You go from 0 to 100 emotionally. A small issue feels like a major problem. A minor inconvenience turns into emotional exhaustion. Emotional pacing teaches you to respond gradually instead of explosively. Not everything deserves the same emotional force. Some situations deserve a gentle response, some deserve none, some deserve patience, some deserve distance. Pacing means you don't let every thought or feeling escalate. You remain steady because you don't allow your emotions to hit extremes. Another important part of consistency is emotional detachment from outcomes. People drain themselves emotionally when they try to control what cannot be controlled. They spend emotional energy trying to shape outcomes that depend on other people, external situations, or unpredictable factors. Detachment is not indifference. It is acceptance. It is the understanding that you can control your actions but not the results. When you detach from what you cannot influence, your emotional energy stabilizes. You stop wasting energy on things that belong to fate, not effort. Another crucial part of emotional consistency is learning recovery. Emotional consistency does not mean you never get tired. Emotional consistency means you know how to recharge quickly. Emotionally inconsistent people stay drained for days because they don't know how to restore themselves. Recovery habits can be small but powerful. Sitting quietly for 5 minutes, going for a walk, listening to calming sounds, stepping away from screens, saying no to conversations, resetting your breathing. You don't need hours to recover emotionally, you need intention. Recovery is emotional maintenance. Without it, emotional overspending becomes inevitable. Another essential part of emotional consistency is handling emotional highs. Most people think only negative emotions drain energy, but emotional highs can drain you too. Excitement, anticipation, passion, over-engagement, these can all drain emotional energy if unmanaged. Consistency means you don't let high emotions lead you into low crashes. You manage your highs with awareness, keeping emotional intensity steady rather than volatile. And perhaps the most important part of emotional consistency is learning emotional priorities. Not everything deserves the same emotional investment. Some things matter deeply. Some things matter temporarily. Some things do not matter at all. Emotional consistency is choosing wisely where to place your emotion. You stop giving emotional energy to everything. You stop letting people control your emotional world. You stop over-investing in moments that don't matter. You stop overthinking situations that are insignificant. You stop reacting to noise. You stop draining yourself on meaningless issues. And you start saving your emotional energy for peace, for goals, for relationships that matter, for growth, for clarity, for your future. When emotional consistency becomes your standard, emotional overspending becomes rare. The leaks that once drained you stop mattering. Situations that once overwhelmed you become manageable. People who once drained you lose their power. Thoughts that once spiraled now fade quickly. Your emotional energy becomes stable. Your reactions become predictable. Your mind becomes grounded. Your day becomes smoother. Your habits become stronger. Your self-respect increases. Your discipline improves. Your peace deepens. Consistency is not a personality trait. It is a trained skill. And emotional consistency is the strongest foundation you can ever build for your life. Chapter 8. Emotions as signals, not commands. One of the greatest reasons people emotionally overspend is not because they have too many emotions, but because they treat emotions as instructions instead of information. They believe every feeling must be followed, every sensation must be acted on, every emotional wave must become a decision, and because emotions fluctuate constantly, their energy is spent endlessly. This chapter transforms the way you see your emotions. It teaches you how to separate feeling from reacting, how to observe emotions instead of obeying them, and how to use emotions as signals, not commands. When you understand this distinction, your entire emotional world becomes lighter, calmer, and more controlled. You stop spending energy on emotional impulses. You stop reacting to temporary feelings. You stop treating every emotion as a crisis. You stop draining your mind by following sensations that pass within minutes. Imagine someone who receives every notification on their phone and reacts immediately. Ding. Panic. Ding. Excitement. Ding. Anger. Ding. Jealousy. Ding. Stress. Ding. Confusion. They jump at every sound because they think every alert requires action. Now imagine another person who receives notifications but chooses which ones to respond to. Some they ignore. Some they leave for later. Some they look at briefly. Some they respond to calmly. Their energy is controlled because they choose their reactions. Your emotions are notifications, but most people treat them as commands. A moment of fear triggers a full emotional meltdown. A moment of anger turns into an argument. A small disappointment becomes an entire bad day. A moment of insecurity becomes self-sabotage. One uncomfortable feeling becomes a decision that changes everything. This is emotional overspending at its worst, when temporary emotions lead to permanent consequences. To stop emotional overspending, you must learn this truth. Emotions are signals that something inside or outside you needs attention. They are messages, not orders. Fear does not mean run. Anger does not mean fight. Sadness does not mean quit. Jealousy does not mean compare. Anxiety does not mean react now. Insecurity does not mean you're not enough. Fear often means pay attention. Anger often means a boundary is being crossed. Sadness often means something matters to you. Jealousy often means you desire something you're not pursuing. Anxiety often means you need clarity. Insecurity often means you're growing beyond your comfort zone, Sunosen. When you treat emotions as data instead of commands, your emotional spending drops dramatically. You stop wasting energy on every impulse. You stop reacting to every feeling. You stop being dragged into emotional storms that you could have avoided. Let's explore how emotions drain you when you obey them blindly. Start with anxiety. Anxiety is a powerful emotion. It floods your mind quickly. It makes you imagine the worst. It creates scenarios that feel real, even though they are not. But anxiety is usually a request for more information, not an order to panic. It signals uncertainty. It signals confusion. It signals a need for clarity. But most people treat anxiety as a threat. They react without thinking. They spend emotional energy trying to control what isn't happening. Now think about anger. Anger is intense, loud, and impulsive. It feels like a command. Defend yourself, argue back, fight, respond. But anger is actually a sign that one of your limits is being crossed or that something you value is being threatened. It doesn't require immediate action. It requires understanding. But people obey anger and react immediately. They spend emotional energy cleaning up the consequences for days afterward. Then there is sadness. Sadness is heavy. It makes you want to withdraw from life. It whispers that nothing is worth trying. But sadness is often simply a signal that something meaningful has been lost or neglected. It is a request for rest, reflection, or healing. Yet many people obey sadness like a command and shut down completely, spending emotional energy resisting life rather than understanding what hurts. Insecurity is another emotional command people obey too quickly. When insecurity arises, it feels like the truth. You feel not good enough, not capable, not attractive, not valuable. But insecurity is not truth. It is a signal that you are stepping into unfamiliar territory. It is your mind saying, you are outside your comfort zone. But instead of seeing insecurity as a sign of growth, people treat it as a fact and emotionally withdraw. Jealousy also drains people emotionally. Instead of seeing jealousy as a signal that you want something someone else has, people obey it like a command. They compare themselves endlessly. They drain emotional energy feeling inferior, but jealousy is data. It tells you what you desire. It gives clarity. It shows direction. But when you obey it emotionally instead of learning from it, it weakens you. The truth is simple. Emotions guide you, but they should never lead you. They help you understand yourself, but they should not take control of your actions. The real power of emotional discipline is the ability to create a pause between feeling and reacting. A pause is emotional savings. A pause is emotional protection. A pause is emotional clarity. In that pause, you can ask yourself, no, what is this emotion trying to tell me? Is this feeling temporary or important? Does this emotion require action or observation? Is reacting right now worth my emotional energy? Is this emotion based on reality or imagination? Is this something I need to fix or something I need to let pass? This moment of questioning saves emotional energy that would otherwise be wasted on unnecessary reactions. Think about how many emotional expenses could be avoided with a simple pause. A misunderstanding could be solved without a fight. A worry could fade without becoming a crisis. A fear could disappear without becoming a decision. A moment of insecurity could pass without affecting your self-worth. A moment of sadness could be processed without destroying your day. A moment of anger could be released without hurting someone you care about. When you treat emotions as data, your emotional world becomes balanced. You stop overspending. You stop overdrawing. You stop emotionally bankrupting yourself. To deeply understand this, imagine your emotions as weather. You don't scream at the rain. You don't fight the wind. You don't panic when clouds appear. You watch. You wait. You adjust. You understand that weather changes. You don't obey the weather. You respond to it wisely. Emotions are the weather of your mind. They change, they rise, they fall, they intensify, they pass. But if you treat them as commands, you get drenched by every emotional storm. You get blown away by every emotional wind. You get blinded by every emotional fog. Instead, observe your emotions the way you observe weather. This is a moment of anxiety. It will pass. This is a moment of frustration. It will fade. This is a moment of sadness. It will soften. This is a moment of insecurity. It will loosen. This emotion is here, but it is not my identity. This is how emotional power is built. Another key part of treating emotions as signals is acknowledging them without being controlled by them. Ignoring emotions is emotional repression, and repression leads to bigger problems. But acknowledging emotions without obeying them is emotional mastery. You don't waste energy fighting emotions. You don't waste energy denying them. You don't waste energy hiding them. You simply let them exist without letting them control your life. Emotional discipline is not the absence of emotion. Emotional discipline is the ability to manage emotion. It is the ability to feel deeply without breaking. It is the ability to experience strong emotions without reacting impulsively. It is the ability to understand your feelings without drowning in them. It is the ability to let emotions move through you without carrying them all day. When emotions become signals, your mind becomes predictable, stable, and controlled. You stop getting swept away by every emotional impulse. You stop spending energy on feelings that don't deserve action. You stop reacting in ways that drain you. You begin to see emotions clearly. You begin to understand yourself deeply. You begin to respond intentionally. You begin to conserve emotional energy. You begin to grow. And slowly, you begin to feel powerful. Not because you have no emotions, but because your emotions no longer rule you. Chapter 9. Building your mental gym. Training the mind like a muscle. If your mind was a muscle, how strong would it be? How trained? How disciplined? How capable of handling pressure, unpredictability, discomfort, conflict, and emotional noise. Most people spend years strengthening their bodies but never once train their minds. They lift weights but collapse under stress. They run miles but fall apart under emotional pressure. They build physical endurance but have zero emotional endurance. They look strong on the outside but crumble on the inside because their mind is untrained. This chapter teaches you how to build your mental gym, how to train your mind the same way athletes train their bodies deliberately, consistently, and intentionally. When your mind becomes strong, emotional spending becomes rare. When your mental muscles develop, emotional waste becomes minimal. When your inner strength grows, emotional chaos loses its power over you. Your mind is the most powerful tool you have, but like any tool, it must be trained. Untrained minds react impulsively. Untrained minds waste energy. Untrained minds fall into emotional traps. Untrained minds get fatigued easily. Untrained minds collapse under small triggers. But trained minds? They stay calm under pressure. They choose responses instead of reactions. They save emotional energy. They direct attention wisely. They maintain clarity in chaos. They recover quickly from emotional hits. They endure discomfort without losing themselves. You don't accidentally develop mental strength. You train it, you practice it, you build it intentionally. The first element of your mental gym is controlled discomfort. Just like lifting weights tears your muscles so they grow back stronger, controlled discomfort challenges your mind so it learns resilience. This discomfort doesn't need to be dramatic. In fact, small discomforts practiced consistently create the strongest mental foundation. A cold shower is not about water. It's about teaching your mind you can be uncomfortable and still stay calm. Delayed notifications are not about discipline. They're about teaching your mind. You don't have to react instantly. Sitting still in silence is not about peace. It's about teaching your mind. You can be with your thoughts without being controlled by them. Finishing a task even when you don't feel like it is not just productivity. It's training your mind to follow intention, not emotion. These tiny exercises gradually build emotional endurance. Your mind becomes less reactive. Your feelings become less intense. Your triggers lose power. Your emotional spending decreases because your mind no longer collapses under small pressures. Another major element of your mental gym is training focus. One of the biggest emotional leaks in life is scattered attention. When your attention is divided, your emotional energy drains without your awareness. Every unfinished task, every open loop, every half-done commitment drains your mind. Training focus is not just about productivity, it is emotional protection. When you control your attention, you control your emotional energy. Focus training can be as simple as doing one thing at a time, putting your phone away, finishing tasks completely, setting a timer for deep work, practicing short bursts of undistracted attention. Every minute you spend training focus strengthens the mental muscles that prevent emotional overspending. Another element of your mental gym is emotional exposure. Not hiding from discomfort, but facing it with awareness. Most people avoid uncomfortable feelings. They run from sadness. They hide from anxiety. They distract themselves from loneliness. They deny anger. They bury pain. But avoidance is emotional weakness. It drains energy because what you avoid grows bigger. What you fear becomes heavier. What you escape becomes a burden. In the mental gym, you face emotions with controlled exposure. You allow yourself to feel discomfort for a moment. You watch the emotion instead of running from it. You say, "This is anxiety, not danger." You say, "This is sadness, not collapse." You say, "This emotion is here, but it is not me." This exposure builds emotional immunity. Just like exposing your body to small amounts of stress builds physical immunity, exposing your mind to emotional discomfort builds mental resilience. You stop treating emotions like threats. You stop treating feelings like commands. You stop panicking when emotional waves rise. Another part of your mental gym is training your self-talk. Your inner voice is one of the biggest sources of emotional spending. Most people speak to themselves in ways they would never speak to someone they love. They criticize themselves endlessly. They repeat negativity. They attack their own worth. They question their abilities. They judge their mistakes brutally. This drains emotional energy faster than anything else. Training your inner voice means rewriting the way you speak to yourself. Not with fake positivity, but with strength, with truth, with clarity, with self-respect. You train your inner voice to become your coach, not your enemy. Instead of "I can't handle this," your inner voice learns to say, "I can handle this one step at a time." Instead of "I always mess things up," your inner voice learns to say, "I'm learning, I'm improving, I'm human." Instead of "I am not enough," your inner voice learns to say, "I am growing into enough." Instead of "everything is going wrong," your inner voice learns to say, "I will manage what I can and release what I cannot control." This voice becomes emotional armor. It protects you from yourself. It reduces emotional waste. It keeps you mentally composed. It strengthens your ability to handle difficult days. Another element of your mental gym is emotional stamina. Emotional stamina is your ability to stay steady when things go wrong. Most people can stay calm when life is easy, but emotional stamina is measured on hard days, the days when plans collapse, when people disappoint you, when your energy is low, when emotions are loud, when life feels unfair. On those days, an untrained mind overspends emotionally. It panics, it spirals, it gives up, it falls apart. It drains all remaining energy on fear, frustration, complaints, or self-doubt. But a trained mind does something different. It slows down. It adapts. It breathes. It maintains composure. It responds instead of reacting. It conserves emotional energy instead of wasting it. Another major training tool in your mental gym is selective attention. Not everything deserves your mind. Not every thought deserves your belief. Not every person deserves emotional access. Not every situation deserves emotional involvement. Selective attention is emotional economy. Just like athletes protect their bodies from unnecessary injuries, you must protect your mind from unnecessary emotional involvement. Keep your emotional energy for your goals, your peace, your relationships, and your growth, not for trivial distractions. And then there is the training of mental recovery. In physical training, rest is as important as work. Muscles grow during recovery. The mind works the same way. Emotional strength requires rest. Recovery is not weakness, it is discipline. Recovery means stepping away from emotional noise. Recovery means disconnecting from draining people. Recovery means breathing deeply. Recovery means taking breaks without guilt. Recovery means giving your emotions space to settle. Recovery means saying no when you are depleted. Mental strength is built through cycles of challenge and recovery, pressure and release, intensity and rest. Then comes the training of emotional minimalism. Emotional minimalism means reducing unnecessary emotional inputs. It means clearing your mind of emotional clutter. Just like minimalism in physical spaces brings clarity, minimalism in emotions brings stability. It means not carrying 5-year-old conflicts. It means not holding on to imaginary scenarios. It means not letting old pains sit in your mind rent-free. It means not overloading your emotional world with drama. It means decluttering your internal environment. When your emotional world becomes lighter, your mental muscles work better. And finally, the most important part of your mental gym: repetition. Mental strength doesn't come from doing something once. It comes from doing small things every day. When you repeat emotional discipline consistently, it becomes your identity. You become someone who doesn't react impulsively. You become someone who stays grounded under pressure. You become someone who conserves emotional energy. You become someone who handles stress with clarity. You become someone who protects their peace. You become someone whose mind is reliable, steady, strong. This transformation doesn't happen overnight, but it does happen. And when it does, emotional overspending stops being your pattern. It becomes something you used to do before you learned how powerful your mind really is. Chapter 10. The Discipline of Thought. Rewriting your internal narrative. Every person has a story playing inside their mind at all times. A private narration, a running commentary, a constant voice shaping how they see themselves, how they interpret events, and how they react to the world. The inner narrative is one of the most powerful forces in your emotional life. It determines when you spend emotional energy, how much you spend, and on what. But most people are unaware of the massive influence this internal narrator holds. They move through life believing their thoughts are facts, their mental stories are truth, and their internal voice is accurate. They never question the narrative, they never examine it, they never rewrite it. And because of that, they drain emotional energy following stories that are outdated, distorted, or completely untrue. This chapter is about mastering your inner voice. It is about training the discipline of thought. It is about recognizing the difference between what your mind says and what reality is. It is about breaking the habit of believing every thought and learning to interpret thoughts with clarity instead of emotional spending. Thought discipline is not about controlling thoughts. You cannot prevent thoughts from appearing. It is about controlling which thoughts get your attention, your energy, and your emotional investment. Thoughts are suggestions, not commands. But if you never learn that truth, your mind becomes a place of emotional bankruptcy. To understand the power of your internal narrative, imagine two people going through the same situation. One says, "I failed again. I'm hopeless." The other says, "I made a mistake. Let me adjust and try again." Same event, completely different emotional cost. The first person drains themselves with self-criticism. The second saves emotional energy with clarity. Your thoughts are narration, not truth, but your emotional world responds not to truth, but to narration. This is why your inner voice is so important. Negative narration drains you. Catastrophic narration overwhelms you. Insecure narration weakens you. Dramatic narration amplifies pain. Unrealistic narration creates fear. Critical narration destroys confidence. And all of these drain emotional energy without producing any high real progress. Thought art discipline begins with separating the narrator from the truth. The narrator can be influenced by fear, insecurity, past wounds, old habits, emotional pain, or societal conditioning. It can exaggerate, it can catastrophize, it can distort reality, it can lie. Your job is not to silence the narrator, but to evaluate it. Most people do not evaluate their thoughts. They absorb them. When the mind says, "You're not good enough," they feel defeated. When the mind says, "Everyone is judging you," they feel anxious. When the mind says, "This will go wrong," they feel fear. When the mind says, "They don't care," they feel hurt. The emotional cost becomes enormous because the narrator is untrained. Thought discipline asks a simple question. Is this thought true, or is this thought emotional? Imagine how much emotional energy you could save if you asked that question before reacting. Most emotional overspending happens because you treat emotional thoughts like factual thoughts. Emotions can create thoughts. Anxiety creates exaggeration. Fear creates catastrophizing. Sadness creates hopelessness. Insecurity creates self-doubt. Anger creates misinterpretation. The mind takes the emotional intensity and turns it into a story. And because you are wired to react, You obey the story. Thought discipline breaks this cycle. Let's look at some of the most common mental stories that drain emotional energy. The first is the what-if narrative. This is the voice that creates imaginary disasters. What if I fail? What if they leave? What if I embarrass myself? What if it goes wrong? What if things don't work out? This narrative is entirely emotional. It wastes mental energy imagining problems that do not exist. It drains you before anything real even happens. The second is the perfectionist narrative. I must get everything right. I cannot make mistakes. I have to be perfect. If I fail once, I'm done. This narrative creates pressure that drains emotional energy constantly. It makes small tasks feel overwhelming. It turns simple moments into emotional burdens. The third is the comparison narrative. They are ahead. They are better. They are more successful. I'm behind. I'm not doing enough. This narrative destroys emotional confidence. It drains self-worth. It keeps your emotional energy focused on other people instead of your own growth. The fourth is the victim narrative. Everything happens to me. Nothing works out for me. People always treat me badly. Life is unfair to me. This narrative traps you in emotional helplessness. It drains energy because it convinces you that you have no control, so you stop making decisions that would give you back your power. The fifth is the guilt narrative. I should have done better. I shouldn't have said that. It's all my fault. I'm a burden. This narrative drains emotional energy by dragging you into the past. It makes you spend energy on things you cannot change. The sixth is the over-responsibility narrative. I must fix everything. I must keep everyone happy. I must carry everyone's problems. This narrative destroys emotional boundaries. It drains energy because you accept responsibilities that do not belong to you. The seventh is the fear narrative. Something bad will happen. I can't trust people. I can't take risks. I must stay safe. This narrative limits growth. It drains emotional energy by keeping you in a constant state of caution. These narratives shape your emotions. They shape your reactions. They shape your world. And if you do not rewrite them, they will continue to drain you daily. Thought discipline begins with 3 simple practices. The first is watching your thoughts without engagement. When a thought appears, you do not react. You do not obey. You do not push it away. You simply observe. Observation creates distance. Distance saves emotional energy. You say, "This is a thought, not a fact. Let me see it clearly." The second practice is questioning the narrator. You ask yourself, is this thought true? Is this thought helpful? Is this thought emotional? Is this thought based on the past or the present? Questioning weakens the emotional power of the thought. It takes the strength away from the narrative. The third practice is replacing emotional narration with grounded narration. You rewrite the story in your mind, not with unrealistic positivity, but with clarity and balance. Instead of "I'm failing," you say, "I'm learning." Instead of "they must hate me," you say, "I don't know what they think." Instead of "everything will go wrong," you say, "I will deal with things as they come." Instead of "I'm behind," you say, "I am on my own timeline." Instead of "I'm not enough," you say, "I am growing into my potential." This rewiring takes time, but it changes everything. The emotional energy you once wasted responding to negative thoughts becomes energy. You invest in your growth, your goals, your peace, your stability. You begin talking to yourself the way a wise mentor would. You begin coaching yourself instead of punishing yourself. You begin supporting yourself instead of tearing yourself down. Thought discipline also teaches you something powerful. Your thoughts influence your emotions, but your responses influence your life. You cannot stop negative thoughts forever, but you can stop reacting emotionally to them. This is the turning point in emotional discipline. When thoughts lose their authority, emotions lose their intensity. When emotions lose their intensity, emotional spending drops dramatically. You save energy by choosing which thoughts to believe. You save energy by filtering mental noise. You save energy by refusing to feed emotional narratives that harm you. You save energy by focusing on what you can control. And slowly, your inner world becomes stronger. Your mental narration becomes stable. The emotional storms that once drained you now pass quickly. You respond instead of react. You evaluate instead of obey. You choose instead of collapse. Your mind becomes an ally instead of an enemy. Chapter 11. Time as an emotional mirror. How your schedule reveals your inner state. Time is not just minutes and hours. Time is emotional currency. How you use your time reveals how you use your energy. How you fill your day shows what drains you, what strengthens you, what distracts you, and what defines your emotional world. Most people believe they struggle with time management, but the truth is, they struggle with emotional management. Time is not the real problem. Emotions are. When your emotions are scattered, your time is scattered. When your emotions are unrestrained, your schedule becomes chaotic. When your emotions spend freely, your hours are wasted without you noticing. This chapter teaches you how time and emotion are connected, how the way you spend your hours reflects the way you spend your emotional energy, and how emotional discipline automatically transforms your relationship with time. Time is the most honest mirror you have. It exposes what you value, what you avoid, what you obsess over, what you fear, and what you can't let go. Your schedule is not just a plan. It is a reflection of your inner world. If you want to understand your emotional life, look at your time. Look at where your hours go. Look at which moments drain you. Look at which tasks you delay. Look at which people disrupt your day. Look at which habits steal your time. Look at which routines calm you. Look at which activities energize you. Look at which situations hijack your peace. Your time tells the story your emotions cannot hide. When you emotionally overspend, you waste large amounts of time without noticing. Emotional exhaustion slows you down. Emotional chaos distracts you. Emotional triggers interrupt your flow. Emotional noise breaks your concentration. Emotional stress steals your focus. Emotional avoidance makes you procrastinate. Your time is not slipping away randomly, it is slipping away emotionally. Think of how long it takes to recover after a stressful conversation. Think of how many minutes you lose replaying a moment. Think of how many hours you lose overthinking something that didn't matter. Think of how much time you waste watching other people's lives instead of living your own. Think of how much time drains from your day when your emotions are unregulated. You believe time is the problem, but time is innocent. Emotions are the thieves. Emotional overspending makes you feel like you don't have enough time because your emotional energy is too drained to make use of the time you do have. When your emotional battery is low, even simple tasks feel heavy, and heavy tasks become impossible. This is why people procrastinate, not because they are lazy, but because they are emotionally depleted. Their emotional energy is too low to start something meaningful. They are mentally fatigued before the task begins. They do not need more motivation. They need emotional recovery. Understanding time as emotional reflection shows you something important. Your emotional habits shape your schedule more than your goals do. Look at this carefully, Sinni. When you are anxious, you avoid important tasks. Time is wasted. When you are angry, you respond impulsively. Time is wasted. When you are sad, you slow down. Time is wasted. When you are overwhelmed, you freeze. Time is wasted. When you are insecure, you hesitate. Time is wasted. When you are comparing yourself to others, you lose focus. Time is wasted. When you are emotionally drained, you cannot concentrate. Time is wasted. When you are triggered, your entire day collapses. Time is wasted. You did not lose time. You spent it emotionally. This is why emotional discipline is the foundation of time discipline. Once you control your emotional spending, your time becomes organized naturally. Another powerful truth: the rhythm of your schedule reveals your emotional rhythm. People who live in constant emotional chaos have schedules that look chaotic. They rush, they panic, they multitask, they jump between distractions, they overcommit, they stay overwhelmed. They fill their day with activity instead of productivity. But emotionally disciplined people have calm schedules. They plan intentionally. They create boundaries. They take breaks without guilt. They do one thing at a time. They say no without over-explaining. They protect mornings and evenings. They choose time investments the same way they choose emotional investments, carefully. How you use your time shows how you use yourself. One of the most important things to understand in this chapter is emotional pacing. Emotional pacing means giving your emotions and your time the right rhythm. Some tasks require deep focus. Some moments require rest. Some problems require distance. Some situations require immediate action. Some emotions require silence. Emotional pacing is the ability to know which is which. The people who emotionally overspend also overspend their time. They rush into everything. They treat every task as urgent. They treat every message as important. They treat every request as necessary. They run through their days with emotional panic, constantly fighting time instead of working with it. But the emotionally disciplined move through time calmly. They create space between tasks. They create room to breathe. They create space to think. They create space to feel without reacting. They create space to rest. This emotional space translates into time wealth. Another key concept is emotional loops. Emotional loops are patterns that consume both your energy and your time. For example, you wake up and think of something stressful. That thought triggers anxiety. Anxiety slows your morning. You do tasks slowly. You delay important work. You frustrate yourself. You feel guilty for delaying. Then guilt drains more energy. Your entire day collapses into an emotional loop. Every emotional loop is a time trap. Breaking emotional loops frees hours of your life every week. It brings your mind into the present, which is where time actually exists. The past and future drain emotion and time equally, but the present saves both. Another powerful part of this chapter is understanding emotional signatures. An emotional signature is the repeated emotional pattern that shapes your schedule. Everyone has one. Some people's emotional signature is anxiety. They move quickly, react quickly, worry constantly. Their time is shaped by fear. Others have a sadness signature, moving slowly, hesitating, overthinking. Their time is shaped by heaviness. Others have an anger signature, responding impulsively, escalating conflicts, losing hours in emotional fire. Your emotional signature is the feeling that most frequently shapes your day. Identifying it allows you to interrupt it. Once you understand how emotions shape your time, you can begin choosing your emotional investments with intention. You stop giving hours of your day to impulses. You stop letting emotional storms control your tasks. You stop letting small triggers steal large amounts of time. You stop letting distractions consume your day. Your time becomes something valuable again. Another essential part of this chapter is creating non-negotiable hours. Non-negotiable hours are periods of the day where emotional spending is not allowed. In these hours, you protect your focus, your energy, and your goals. You do not entertain emotional drama. You do not respond to emotional messages. You do not engage in unnecessary conversations. You do not allow emotional triggers into your schedule. These hours are not restrictive. they are liberating. They create emotional boundaries around your time. For many people, mornings are the best non-negotiable hours. Emotional chaos early in the day ruins the entire day, but when mornings are protected, the rest of the day becomes structured naturally. Evenings are another essential non-negotiable time. Emotional noise at night steals rest. Emotional stress steals sleep. Emotional spending before bed creates anxiety for the next day. Protecting your evenings protects your emotional battery. Time reflects emotion, but emotion also reflects time. When you save emotional energy, you save time. When you save time, you save emotional energy. They feed each other. This brings us to something profound. Peace creates productivity, not the other way around. People think they must achieve more tasks to feel calm, but emotional discipline flips this upside down. When your mind is calm first, your tasks become easier, faster, cleaner. When your emotions are not draining you, your time becomes generous. When you stop spending emotional energy unnecessarily, you complete things with less effort. Time is not scarce. Emotional discipline is. Emotional waste is what makes time feel scarce. Emotional clarity is what makes time feel abundant. Once you see time as an emotional mirror, you begin correcting your emotional habits. You stop overspending on people who drain you. You stop wasting emotional effort on things that are not your responsibility. You stop giving emotional access to situations that don't deserve it. You stop letting panic write your schedule. You stop letting fear shape your priorities. You begin choosing how to spend both your energy and your minutes. You schedule your peace the same way you schedule your tasks. You remove emotional noise from your day. You structure your time around your strengths, not your triggers. You say no without guilt because you understand the emotional cost of saying yes to everything. You follow a rhythm that protects your energy. Slowly, your relationship with time transforms. You feel less rushed. You feel less chaotic. You feel less overwhelmed. You feel more still, more present, more grounded. And as your emotional spending decreases, your time increases. It feels like life expands. You finally feel in control of your day. You stop chasing time and start controlling it. You stop fighting your schedule and start shaping it. This is the intersection where emotional discipline becomes life discipline. Chapter 12. Environments of Emotional Excellence. How your surroundings shape your energy. Your emotional life does not exist in isolation. It does not float freely above your reality. It is shaped, quietly, constantly, powerfully, by your environment. The people you talk to, the places you spend time in, the routines you live in, the digital spaces you consume, the habits that fill your day, the atmosphere that surrounds you. All of it influences your emotional spending more than you realize. Most people underestimate their environment. They believe emotional strength comes entirely from their mind. They blame themselves for feeling drained, distracted, overwhelmed, unfocused, anxious, or mentally tired. They think it's their fault. They think they are weak. They think they lack discipline. But in truth, their environment is working against them. Your environment can be a source of emotional strength, or a silent thief that steals your energy every day. It can protect your peace, or poison your mind. It can make discipline easier or make emotional control nearly impossible. This chapter reveals the invisible forces in your surroundings that shape your emotional world. You will learn how your environment contributes to emotional overspending, how it influences your decisions, how it drains or fuels your mental battery, and how you can intentionally design an environment that conserves energy instead of draining it. Let's begin with the most powerful influence: the people around you. You become emotionally similar to the people you spend time with. Not intentionally, but inevitably, human minds sync, emotional states spread. If you live with someone who is constantly stressed, you begin feeling stressed. If you spend time with complainers, you begin complaining. If your environment is full of negativity, drama, chaos, or anxiety, it silently transfers into your emotional world. People are emotional ecosystems. If you spend time with emotionally wasteful people, those who overreact, gossip, complain, panic, compare, blame, dramatize, or emotionally demand from you, your emotional energy gets drained even when you are not aware of it. There are people who enter a room and calm it, and there are people who enter a room and drain it. There are people who bring clarity, and people who bring emotional noise. There are people who lift your energy, and people who extract it. Your emotions respond instantly to the emotional climate around you. Even silence between two people contains emotional energy. Emotional draining is not always loud. Sometimes it is subtle. Sometimes it is the tension in the air. Sometimes it is the heaviness of someone's presence. Sometimes it is the expectation placed on you. Sometimes it is the unspoken emotional labor they expect you to carry. If you live in an environment where you constantly manage other people's emotions, you never have enough left for your own. Another major environmental drain is digital space. The modern world forces your attention into an emotional battlefield every day. Social media, notifications, messages, news, comments, comparisons. Your digital environment is engineered to keep your emotional system activated. Every alert pulls your focus. Every post triggers emotion. Every comparison drains energy. Every argument steals peace. Every scroll invites your mind into someone else's emotional world. Your digital environment doesn't just distract you, it shapes your emotional habits. It conditions your attention to be scattered. It normalizes emotional reactivity. It encourages comparison. It stimulates insecurity. It weakens focus. It increases emotional expenditure without giving anything meaningful in return. You cannot stop emotional spending if your digital environment is constantly demanding emotional payments. Then there is your physical environment. The spaces you live in shape your emotional state more than you realize. A cluttered room creates emotional noise. A chaotic environment increases stress. A disorganized space triggers subconscious tension. A dark room weakens mental energy. A loud environment makes emotional control harder. A messy desk creates mental fog. Physical clutter creates emotional clutter. When your environment is messy, your mind cannot rest. When your surroundings are chaotic, your thoughts mirror that chaos. When your space is unclean, your emotional rhythm becomes unstable. You spend emotional energy unconsciously trying to navigate through the noise around you. Cleaning your space is not just cleaning, it is emotional optimization. It is removing external noise so your inner world can breathe. Your environment also includes your routines. Routines are emotional architecture. If your daily routine is chaotic, your emotions become chaotic. If your routine has no structure, your emotional energy flows randomly. When your life lacks rhythm, your emotions consume energy unpredictably. Routines create emotional boundaries. They prevent emotional leakage. They give your mind predictability. They give your emotions stability. They protect your time. They regulate your energy. Your environment includes your habits, not just what you do, but how you do it. Habits are the systems your emotions rely on. A lack of healthy habits creates emotional instability. Too many unhealthy habits create emotional exhaustion. Your environment includes noise levels, the amount of sunlight, the people who enter your space, the emotional atmosphere of your home, the social dynamics of your workplace, even the things you consume online. All of these accumulate and shape your emotional spending. But one of the most powerful environmental influences is friction. Friction is the ease or difficulty of performing a habit. High friction habits drain more emotional energy. Low-friction habits feel effortless. Most people unknowingly design environments full of emotional friction. They keep their phones near them at all times. High friction for emotional calm. They keep themselves exposed to notifications. High friction for focus. They surround themselves with draining people. High friction for peace. They work in chaotic spaces. High friction for mental clarity. They allow constant interruptions. High friction for productivity. Your environment must remove friction from healthy emotional habits and add friction to emotionally draining ones. For example, if you want to stop reacting emotionally to messages, create friction. Turn off message previews. Place your phone far away. Disable notifications during important hours. If you want to stop emotional overspending on social media, add friction. Log out after each session. Remove apps from your home screen. Turn your phone to grayscale. If you want to protect your emotional energy from certain people, add friction. Limit access. Delay responses. Refuse unnecessary conversations. If you want to conserve emotional energy in your home, create a calm environment. Reduce clutter. Open windows. Add light. Create a quiet corner. Remove noise triggers. When your environment is designed to protect your peace, your emotional spending reduces automatically. Another important part of creating environments of emotional excellence is emotional boundaries in social spaces. You don't need to absorb everything said to you. You don't need to respond to every comment. You don't need to participate in every emotional conversation. You don't need to solve everyone's problems. You don't need to engage in pointless conflict. You don't need to explain yourself endlessly. Social boundaries save emotional energy faster than any other strategy. Your environment also includes who you allow into your emotional world. Some people deserve physical proximity, but not emotional access. Some deserve emotional access, but not your time. Some deserve neither. Emotionally intelligent people make these distinctions effortlessly. Emotionally overspent people do not. Another effect of your environment is emotional priming. What you see, hear, smell, and feel within your environment influences how your mind behaves. For example, waking up to clutter primes your mind for stress. Starting your day with social media primes your mind for comparison. Going to bed with emotional noise primes your mind for restless sleep. Your environment sets the emotional tone of your day before you even begin participating in it. This leads us to something extremely important. You cannot achieve emotional discipline in a chaotic environment. You cannot gain emotional mastery in a space full of emotional triggers. You cannot conserve emotional energy if your surroundings constantly demand it. Changing your environment is not about escaping life. It's about creating conditions that support emotional clarity. When you intentionally shape your environment, emotional overspending becomes a rare occurrence. Your triggers fade, your mind stabilizes, your reactions soften, your energy becomes predictable, your emotional battery lasts longer, your days feel lighter. You cannot control every part of your environment, but you can control enough of it to make a massive difference. Control who has emotional access to you. Control what enters your digital space. Control the physical environment you spend most of your time in. Control the routines that shape your day. Control the people who drain or fuel your energy. Control the habits that surround you. Control the noise you allow near your mind. When your environment supports your inner world, your emotional world transforms. Chapter 13. When nobody is watching, the private habits that shape your emotional wealth. There is a version of you that the world sees, the disciplined version, the composed version, the polite version, the controlled version, the version that tries, the version that speaks carefully, acts thoughtfully, and chooses responses that appear balanced. But then there is another version of you, the private version. The version that exists when no one is watching, the version that reveals who you truly are. This version tells the real story of your emotional strength, not your public behavior, not your social mask, not the polished side you show others. Your private habits are the truest reflection of your emotional life. Your emotional spending patterns reveal themselves most clearly when you are alone. Your mental discipline is exposed in the moments when there is no audience. This chapter is about those private moments, the ones that either build your emotional wealth or drain it, the ones that determine whether you will rise in emotional power or remain trapped in emotional exhaustion. What you do when nobody is watching shapes the emotional life you live when everyone is watching. Most people put effort into managing their emotions publicly. They stay calm in front of others. They think before reacting in front of crowds. They choose polite words. They hold back tears. They hide frustration. They pretend everything is okay. They maintain appearance. But alone, they let thoughts spiral without control. They drown in overthinking. They replay old memories that rip open wounds. They worry about imagined scenarios. They rehearse conflicts that never happened. They talk to themselves negatively. They fall into emotional loops. They drain their energy with private chaos. What weakens you emotionally is rarely public behavior. It is private indulgence. The emotional overspending you do alone builds habits that follow you into the public world, because emotional habits practiced in silence eventually become emotional reactions expressed in real life. If your private mind is chaotic, your public life will eventually collapse under the weight of that chaos. Private habits are powerful. They work like silent architects building the emotional structure of your life. And yet, because nobody sees them, people ignore their importance. They assume what happens internally doesn't matter if it's hidden, but emotional energy does not reset when you step outside. What you do alone affects everything you do with others. Let's explore the private habits that drain emotional energy. One of the biggest drains is private rumination. Rumination is when your mind gets stuck, replaying an emotional moment again and again. It could be a conversation that bothered you, a mistake you made, a situation you regret, or a fear of something coming. Rumination is silent emotional bleeding. While you sit alone scrolling your phone or staring at the ceiling, your emotional energy leaks away drop by drop. Nobody sees it, but it destroys you internally. Another private drain is emotional self-attacks. When you are alone, you speak to yourself in ways you would never speak to another human being. You call yourself names. You criticize your decisions. You judge your body, your mistakes, your past, your flaws. You label yourself with destructive words. You spend emotional energy fighting against yourself, wearing your own spirit down. Another private habit that drains emotional strength is distraction addiction. You reach for your phone every few minutes. You scroll through negative content. You consume emotional noise mindlessly. You fill your mind with stories, videos, comments, and content that trigger insecurity, comparison, irritation, or frustration. This distraction may seem harmless, but every scroll costs you emotional energy. Every negative post steals a little mental strength. Every comparison weakens your self-worth. Every argument online pulls you into emotional chaos. But because you are alone, you don't realize how expensive this habit is. Another emotional drain is private emotional dependency, waiting for validation, attention, messages, likes, or approval from others. When you base your emotional state on someone else's response, you hand over your emotional wallet. You give control of your peace to someone who may not even be thinking about you. This dependency drains your emotional energy without you noticing. Another hidden drain is the habit of mentally rehearsing pain. When you expect rejection, disappointment, failure, or criticism, you create it in your mind before it even happens. This is emotional spending on situations that haven't occurred. Your private mind imagines emotional outcomes that you then feel as if they are real. This habit damages your emotional resilience more than real events ever could. Another drain is emotional isolation. Not the physical kind, but the emotional disconnect that happens when you bottle everything up. You carry burdens alone. You never express what hurts. You pretend you are fine. You never release emotion in healthy ways. Instead, the emotion piles up inside your private world, crowding your mind and draining your energy. Now let's look at the private habits that build emotional wealth. One of the strongest is emotional clarity. When you sit alone and reflect honestly, without judgment, your emotional world becomes organized. You understand why you feel the way you feel. You see patterns. You connect dots. You identify triggers. Your mind becomes a place of clarity instead of confusion. This reflection strengthens your emotional intelligence. Another powerful habit is quiet grounding. When you sit in silence, even for a few minutes, your mind resets. Silence clears emotional noise. Silence rebuilds your emotional battery. Silence anchors your thoughts. Silence gives you space to feel without reacting. Silence is emotional fuel. Another private habit that builds emotional strength is self-support. When you talk to yourself with respect, with compassion, with encouragement, your emotional world stabilizes. You become your own anchor. You become your own ally. You stop draining emotional energy through self-criticism and begin investing it in self-confidence. Another habit is intentional solitude. Solitude is not loneliness. Solitude is personal space. When you choose to be alone to recharge, to think, to reflect, to breathe, your emotional power increases. Your mind resets. Your emotions rebalance. Your strength returns. Another habit that builds emotional wealth is emotional release. Healthy release, not emotional explosions. This can be writing your feelings down, talking to someone you trust, crying when needed, or expressing emotions safely. When emotions release, they stop consuming your internal energy. Another powerful habit is private discipline, the small things you do even when no one is there to praise you. Waking up on time, keeping your space organized. Saying no to distractions, making your bed, drinking water, finishing small tasks. These actions strengthen self-respect. And self-respect protects emotional energy. When you are consistent in private, your emotions become stable in public. Another crucial private habit is guarding your digital environment. Choosing what content you allow into your mind. Avoiding negativity. Avoiding toxic influences. Avoiding emotional triggers online. Your digital world is part of your private environment, and guarding it protects your emotional strength. But the strongest private habit of all is emotional honesty. Being honest with yourself about what hurts, being honest about what scares you, being honest about what drains you, being honest about who drains you, being honest about your emotional limits, being honest about what you need to heal. Emotional honesty saves energy because denial is expensive. Avoidance is expensive. Lying to yourself drains emotional fuel. Honesty gives clarity, and clarity is the foundation of emotional discipline. Your private habits create your emotional identity. They shape the person you present to the world. They determine your emotional strength, your emotional boundaries, your reactions, your peace. What you do in silence determines who you become in sound. When nobody is watching, your choices matter even more, because they are the choices that build your emotional baseline. They deepen habits, they create patterns, they form your character. If your private world is chaotic, emotional overspending will be your daily reality. If your private world is disciplined, emotional strength will become your natural state. Emotional mastery begins in the moments no one sees. Chapter 14. Failure without emotional collapse, turning setbacks into control. Failure hurts. It shakes your confidence. It disrupts your plans. It bruises your ego. It confuses your direction. It makes you question your effort, your purpose, and sometimes even your worth. But what truly destroys people is not the failure itself. It is the emotional spending that follows. The emotional aftermath of failure is often far more damaging than the failure itself. You fail at something, and suddenly your mind opens a floodgate of emotional reactions. Shame, regret, self-blame, overthinking, fear of judgment. Replaying the mistake again and again, imagining future failures, questioning your abilities, doubting your potential. This emotional chaos drains the energy you need to rise again. Failure does not stop your life. Emotional collapse does. So, this chapter teaches you how to handle failure without emotionally bankrupting yourself, how to turn setbacks into clarity instead of emotional storms, how to respond to disappointment in a way that saves energy instead of draining it, how to detach emotionally from failure while still learning from it. This is one of the most powerful emotional skills you will ever master. Failure is a part of life, yet most people treat it as an emotional crisis. Every time they fail, they release a wave of self-attack. They create emotional drama. They punish themselves. They allow failure to become a story about who they are instead of what simply happened. They don't just experience failure, they emotionally magnify it. When you emotionally exaggerate failure, small setbacks become big tragedies. One mistake becomes a catastrophe. One rejection becomes a personal judgment. One loss becomes a statement about your identity. And when failure becomes emotional, your energy is consumed by the wrong things. You spend more energy feeling the failure than fixing it. You spend more time replaying the failure than learning from it. You spend more emotion on regret than on recovery. You spend more attention on blame than on correction. This emotional spending keeps you stuck. It traps you in the emotional story of the failure instead of guiding you through it. The truth is simple. Failure is neutral until your emotions give it meaning. Failure is just a result. It's information, it's feedback. It's a signal that something didn't align with your intention. But emotions turn that neutral signal into something dramatic. When your emotions take over, failure feels bigger than it actually is. This chapter teaches you how to keep failure small. To do that, you must learn emotional separation. Emotional separation means seeing failure as an event, not an identity. When you fail, something happened. But it doesn't mean something is wrong with you. Failure is a moment, not a definition. Most people attach failure to their self-worth. They say, "I failed," and then quietly add, "so I must be a failure." That addition is where emotional overspending begins. That is the moment your energy gets drained. That is the moment you lose control. To stop emotional overspending, you must remove that second sentence. "I failed" must remain just that. One statement, one event, one moment. Failure becomes powerful when it loses emotional weight. Let's break down the emotional traps that make failure expensive. The first trap is self-blame. When something goes wrong, your mind immediately points the finger inward. You criticize yourself harshly. You repeat negative statements like a mantra. You drag your mind through emotional mud. You punish yourself more than the situation itself does. Self-blame drains energy because it is emotional self-harm disguised as responsibility. The second trap is imagined judgment. After failure, you imagine what people might think. You create fictional conversations in your mind. You think others are watching, judging, laughing, whispering. Yet in reality, most people are too occupied with their own lives to care deeply about your setbacks. This imagined judgment drains emotional energy because it is built entirely on imagination, not reality. The third trap is emotional replay. You repeat the failure in your mind hundreds of times. You rewind the scene. You replay the mistake. You imagine different outcomes. You dig deeper into regret. Every replay costs emotional energy. Every replay reinforces pain. The fourth trap is fear projection. After failure, your mind jumps into the future and imagines more failures. If I failed now, I will fail again, and again, and again. Your emotional energy gets drained by events that haven't even happened. The fifth trap is avoidance. When failure hurts, you avoid trying again. You avoid anything that might expose you to emotional risk. This avoidance drains energy because you spend your emotional life running instead of moving forward. The sixth trap is personalizing the failure. You make the failure about your identity instead of your behavior. But identity-based interpretation is emotional poison. Behavior can change, skills can grow, strategies can improve. But when you treat failure as a personal judgment, you drain your emotional battery and paralyze your ability to rise. The goal of this chapter is to break these traps permanently. To do that, you must learn the emotional recovery pattern. Acknowledge, analyze, adjust. Acknowledge means accepting the failure without emotional exaggeration. You say, "This happened." Not, "This happened because I'm worthless." Not, "This happened because I never succeed." You acknowledge the event the same way you would acknowledge a fact, without judgment. Analyze means separating emotion from information. You ask, what specifically went wrong? What part was in my control? What pattern does this reveal? What can I change next time? This step turns failure into data, not drama. Adjust means making small corrections. This is where recovery begins. You don't need emotional intensity. You need small, logical changes. When you adjust, failure becomes part of your progress, not a stop sign. This pattern saves emotional energy because it keeps failure small, contained, controlled. Another important skill is emotional detachment. Emotional detachment does not mean you stop caring. It means you stop draining yourself with emotional reactions that prevent growth. Detachment says, I care about the outcome, but I will not destroy myself if it doesn't go my way. I feel disappointed, but I will not collapse. I messed up, but I will not punish myself. I will try again, but I will not carry emotional baggage with me. Detachment is emotional strength in its purest form. It protects your energy. It allows you to see failure clearly. It keeps your emotional world stable. You also need to develop rapid recovery. Emotionally strong people recover quickly from setbacks because they do not waste energy resisting the failure. They accept it early. They process it gracefully. They move forward with commitment. Emotionally weak people stay stuck because they fight the failure emotionally instead of learning from it. Rapid recovery does not mean rushing. It means not lingering unnecessarily. It means giving the event the emotional space it deserves, and no more. Now let's explore the emotional truth. Failure is valuable, not inspirationally but practically. Failure reveals blind spots. Failure exposes weak points. Failure clarifies what matters. Failure forces growth. Failure teaches emotional resilience. Failure strengthens your mental muscles. But only if you approach failure without emotional overspending. If you spend all your energy feeling the failure, you have none left to learn from it. Emotional energy must be conserved for growth, not wasted on regret. Another important truth. Failure always carries a message, but emotional noise makes the message unreadable. When you quiet the emotional storm, you can see that failure is offering information that success never could. It tells you what to fix. It tells you what to avoid. It tells you what to improve. It tells you what to refine. It tells you where you are weak. It tells you where you are strong. It tells you what matters. It tells you what doesn't. Failure is a mirror, not a monster, but emotional spending distorts the mirror until all you see is pain. Let's talk about identity separation. Emotionally strong people say, I failed at something. Emotionally weak people say, I failed because I'm something. This one sentence decides your emotional future. Your identity must remain separate from your outcomes. Your outcomes will change. You will succeed sometimes and fail sometimes. But you must never attach your self-worth to either. You are not your results. You are not your mistakes. You are not your setbacks. You are not your failures. You are the one who learns from them. This brings us to emotional boundaries with failure. After a setback, you must choose how much emotional energy to allow. Most people give failure too much emotional access. They treat it like a close friend. They feed it attention. They nurture it with thoughts. They spend hours analyzing it emotionally instead of practically. Failure does not deserve a long-term emotional relationship. The moment you detach, analyze, and adjust, failure becomes a stepping stone. Another key part of this chapter is understanding emotional recovery rituals. Everyone needs rituals that rebuild emotional strength after disappointment. These rituals can be simple but powerful. Sitting in silence, taking a short walk, journaling, listening to calming sounds, deep breathing, reframing thoughts, resetting the body, resetting the focus. These rituals anchor your emotions. They help you regain control of your mind. They help you rebuild energy that failure temporarily drained. Finally, you must redefine what failure means to you. If failure is a threat, you will collapse emotionally. If failure is a teacher, you will grow. If failure is a punishment, you will fear it. If failure is a lesson, you will handle it with clarity. If failure is personal, you will drain your energy. If failure is neutral, you will remain emotionally steady. Emotionally disciplined people understand that failure is simply part of the process. They expect setbacks. They anticipate mistakes. They accept imperfection. They prepare emotionally for obstacles. They do not treat failure as a surprise. They treat it as an ingredient of success. When failure is no longer an emotional earthquake, it becomes a small bump in the road. This chapter is your emotional shield. It protects you from the emotional waste that follows failure. It teaches you how to turn pain into power, setbacks into skill, disappointment into direction. Failure is not the end. Emotional collapse is. But when you stop emotionally overspending on failure, nothing can break you. Chapter 15. Energy before time. Why emotional power drives your entire life. People spend their whole lives learning how to manage time. They buy planners. They create schedules. They make to-do lists. They set alarms. They download productivity apps. They read books about time management. They try to squeeze more hours out of each day. But they forget one thing. Time management is useless without energy management. What good is a perfectly planned schedule if you are emotionally exhausted? What good is extra time if you don't have the strength to use it? What good is a to-do list if your emotional energy is so low that even simple tasks feel heavy? Time is not your real problem. Emotional energy is. This chapter breaks one of the biggest myths of productivity, that controlling your hours leads to success. The truth is the opposite. Controlling your emotional energy leads to success. Time is not the primary resource. Energy is. Your emotional state determines the quality of your day, your decisions, your relationships, your habits, your focus, and your life. When your emotional energy is strong, you do more in an hour than most people do in an entire day. When your emotional energy is weak, an hour feels like a burden. Energy creates efficiency. Energy creates clarity. Energy creates discipline. Energy creates momentum. Energy creates consistency. This chapter teaches you how emotional energy influences everything you do. You will learn how to protect it, manage it, and invest it wisely so that your life becomes easier, calmer, and more controlled. Let's begin with a simple truth. Emotional energy is not the same as physical energy. Your body can be fine while your mind is collapsing. Emotional exhaustion feels like heaviness in your chest, fog in your thoughts, pressure in your head, and a lack of motivation that makes even simple tasks feel overwhelming. When you're emotionally drained, you move slower, think slower, react faster, and feel deeper. Your brain tries to conserve what little energy you have left by shutting down your motivation, minimizing your creativity, and narrowing your focus. You slip into survival mode. Most people don't realize they are emotionally bankrupt until they try to do something productive and feel like their brain can't move. Because emotional energy determines mental function. Your brain uses emotional energy to focus, make decisions, stay motivated, regulate emotions, maintain discipline, resist distractions, handle pressure, think clearly, manage stress, perform tasks. When emotional energy is low, every one of these functions weakens. This is why emotional overspending is so dangerous. It drains the very resource required to live effectively. Think of emotional energy as the battery that powers your brain. If the battery is full, everything works. If the battery is low, everything breaks. Most people begin their day with a half-charged internal battery, already tired, already overwhelmed, already mentally drained because they overspent emotional energy the day before. They wake up carrying yesterday's emotional load. They start the day behind before it even begins. And then they blame themselves for lacking motivation, discipline, or focus. They call themselves lazy, weak, inconsistent, unproductive. They push harder, they force themselves, they pressure themselves. They try to operate on an empty battery. And that pressure drains even more emotional energy. This chapter teaches you how to break this cycle by understanding one truth. Protecting your emotional energy must come before anything else. Let's talk about emotional charge and emotional drain. 9. Certain activities charge your emotional energy. Certain activities drain it. Certain people charge it. Others drain it. Certain thoughts charge it. Others drain it. The first step to emotional mastery is identifying your emotional chargers and drainers. Chargers include silence, calm environments, meaningful work, supportive relationships, deep focus, healthy routines, emotional boundaries, gratitude, rest, nature, creativity, reflection, clarity. Drainers include overthinking, emotional noise, negativity, toxic people, anxiety, comparison, arguments, emotional responsibility for others, chaotic routines, clutter, rushing, fear-based thoughts. Once you see the pattern, everything changes. You can no longer blame yourself for lacking discipline when the problem is emotional drainage. You can no longer judge yourself for not finishing tasks when the real issue is emotional fatigue. You can no longer force yourself through burnout when the solution is to recharge your emotional battery. One of the biggest emotional drainers is decision fatigue. Every decision you make costs emotional energy. Small decisions, big decisions, unnecessary decisions. This is why your mind feels tired at the end of the day, even if you did nothing physically demanding. Emotionally disciplined people conserve energy by reducing decisions. They simplify routines. They eliminate unnecessary choices. They automate habits. They follow consistent rhythms. They do not waste emotional energy choosing repeatedly when they can choose once and repeat. Another major drainer is conflict, internal or external. Internal conflict is when your thoughts fight each other. External conflict is when your relationships drain you. Both burn emotional energy rapidly. This is why emotionally stable people avoid unnecessary arguments. They protect their peace because they know emotional conflict is expensive. Another massive emotional drain is resistance. Resistance is when you mentally push against something you need to do. You keep avoiding the task, thinking about it, worrying about it, dragging it out. You waste emotional energy fighting the task instead of doing it. This emotional resistance drains energy even before you take action. The moment you stop resisting and start doing, your emotional energy stabilizes. Another drain is living out of alignment. When your daily actions do not match your values, when you say yes to things you don't want, when you surround yourself with people who contradict your boundaries, you drain emotional energy constantly. Nothing drains you faster than living a life that is not yours. Let's talk about emotional anchoring. Emotionally stable people have anchors, small habits that stabilize their emotional state. These can be mindful breaths, grounding routines, morning stillness, a consistent sleep schedule, a clean environment, or meaningful rituals. Anchors save emotional energy because they prevent emotional storms from blowing your day apart. Anchors bring your mind back to center. Without anchors, every small emotional wave becomes a crisis. Another key part of emotional energy is renewal. People think they need long vacations to recover emotionally, but the truth is, emotional renewal happens in small moments, not large escapes. A short walk, a few minutes of silence, a deep breath, a small break from screens, a moment of reflection, all of these renew emotional energy. The emotionally wealthy renew themselves multiple times a day. The emotionally poor wait until burnout. Now let's explore how emotional energy affects discipline. Discipline is not the ability to force yourself. Discipline is the ability to execute without being emotionally sabotaged. If your emotional energy is high, discipline feels natural. You move smoothly, you take action, you follow your plans, you stay committed. If your emotional energy is low, discipline feels impossible. Emotional energy is the fuel of discipline. This is why highly disciplined people protect their emotional energy like treasure. They avoid emotional drama. They avoid draining conversations. They limit exposure to negativity. They conserve emotional fuel for work that matters. When you understand emotional energy, you realize that emotional boundaries are not selfish. They are survival. They are not coldness. They are preservation. They are not avoidance. They are protection. Another important part of emotional energy is selective engagement. You cannot give emotional attention to everything. You must choose what deserves your energy. You must choose the battles worth fighting. You must choose the conversations worth having. You must choose the relationships worth investing in. Emotionally wealthy people are selective. They engage only in what aligns with their values, their goals, or their peace. They do not entertain emotional distractions. Let's talk about emotional leaks again. Emotional leaks happen when you spend energy unconsciously, when someone irritates you, when a small inconvenience becomes a big emotional reaction, when a memory pulls you into the past, when fear pulls you into the future. Emotional leaks drain your energy even when nothing is happening. Emotionally disciplined people patch leaks early. They notice tension, they breathe, they ground themselves, they stop the leak before it becomes a flood. Another important part of emotional energy is intention. Emotionally wealthy people use their energy on purpose. They know what matters. They know what doesn't. They know where to invest their emotional attention and where to withdraw it. Energy without intention is emotional waste. Intention without energy is emotional exhaustion. Both together create emotional excellence. Finally, emotional energy shapes your entire identity. When your emotional energy is high, you feel confident, capable, stable, balanced, and grounded. When your emotional energy is low, you feel insecure, anxious, overwhelmed, confused, and drained. Your emotional energy determines who you are on any given day. This is why emotional management is not optional. It is the foundation of a stable life. When you protect your emotional energy, everything becomes easier. Your habits, your relationships, your decisions, your discipline, your peace. This chapter teaches you a new way of living. Energy before time, emotion before effort, stability before success. When your emotional energy becomes your priority, your life becomes your control. Chapter 16. Discipline Connections. Protecting your energy in relationships. Nothing drains or strengthens your emotional world more than the people you connect with. Relationships, whether family, friends, partners, co-workers, or acquaintances, are emotional exchanges. You give energy, you receive energy, you invest attention, you share parts of yourself, you absorb parts of others, and these exchanges either build you or break you. This chapter teaches you how to navigate relationships without emotionally overspending, how to protect your energy while still caring deeply, how to engage without getting drained, how to love without losing yourself, how to stay connected without collapsing under emotional pressure. Emotional discipline is not about distancing yourself from people. It is about managing the emotional cost of connection. Relationships are where most people lose their emotional wealth. Not because people intend to hurt them, but because emotional exchanges are powerful and often unconscious. You might leave a conversation feeling lighter and uplifted, or you might leave feeling drained, confused, irritated, or overwhelmed. The difference lies in emotional boundaries. Emotionally overspent people give too much in relationships. They give time they don't have. They give emotional labor they shouldn't carry. They give reassurance, comfort, validation, advice, or attention in doses that drain them. They take responsibility for other people's moods, and they anticipate others' emotions. They absorb tension. They carry burdens that are not theirs. Emotionally disciplined people do something different. They connect without losing themselves. They help without sacrificing their peace. They love without abandoning their emotional boundaries. They understand that connection should not cost you your stability. Let's begin with the core truth of this chapter. Emotional boundaries are the foundation of healthy relationships. People misunderstand boundaries. They think boundaries push others away. They think boundaries are selfish. They think boundaries create distance. But boundaries do the opposite. Boundaries make relationships sustainable. Boundaries make connections healthier. Boundaries prevent resentment, burnout, and emotional imbalance. Boundaries protect your energy so you can connect from a place of strength instead of depletion. One of the biggest emotional drains in relationships is over-responsibility. This is when you take responsibility for someone else's emotions, happiness, decisions, or reactions. You feel guilty when they are upset. You feel obligated to fix their problems. You feel pressured to keep them comfortable. You carry emotional weight that does not belong to you. But emotional responsibility cannot be outsourced. Every person is responsible for their own inner world. You can support them, yes. You can listen to them. You can guide them. You can care for them, but you cannot carry their emotional life on your back. When you do, your emotional energy disappears quickly. Another emotional drain in relationships is emotional availability without boundaries. Being emotionally available is a strength, but being available to everyone all the time without limits is emotional suicide. People who do not protect their emotional availability attract emotional takers, people who want comfort, reassurance, attention, and validation, but give nothing in return. To stop emotional overspending, you must limit access to your inner world. Not everyone deserves your emotional energy. Not everyone deserves your vulnerability, your time, your attention, your comfort, or your emotional gifts. Your energy must be given deliberately, not freely. We must also talk about emotional expectations. Many relationships suffer because one person expects emotional labor from the other without awareness. They expect you to always understand, always listen, always be available, always respond instantly, always soothe, always adjust, always empathize. Emotionally disciplined people know how to break these silent expectations. They communicate clearly. They say, "I care, but I need space right now." They say, "I cannot hold this emotional weight for you." They say, "I am here, but I have limits." They say, "I want to help, but I cannot sacrifice my peace." This is not selfish, it is emotional maturity. Another major emotional leak in relationships is reacting instead of responding. When your emotions are unregulated, you react impulsively to small things. A tone becomes an attack. A simple comment becomes a conflict. A misunderstanding becomes a crisis. Emotional reactivity drains both people quickly. Emotionally disciplined people pause. They breathe. They look at the situation without emotional magnification. They respond with clarity instead of emotional intensity. They protect their energy by choosing their words carefully. They do not feed unnecessary conflict. They do not escalate. They do not take things personally without reason. This pause is emotional wealth. Another key to protecting emotional energy in relationships is learning when to detach. Detachment does not mean disconnection. It means stepping back emotionally when someone's behavior begins to drain your peace. It's the ability to say, "I'm here, but I won't absorb your chaos. I care, but I won't internalize your frustration. I love you, but your emotions are your responsibility." Detachment creates emotional safety. It prevents you from drowning in other people's storms. Another drain in relationships is over-explaining. Emotionally overspent people feel the need to justify their boundaries, their decisions, their needs, their feelings. They write long explanations. They apologize for wanting space. They overcompensate for saying no. They try to protect others' emotions at the cost of their own. Emotionally disciplined people speak simply. They do not over-explain. They do not seek approval for their boundaries. They do not apologize for protecting their energy. They understand that emotional clarity is more valuable than emotional justification. Another emotional drain is emotional availability at the wrong time. If you are tired, stressed, overwhelmed, or emotionally depleted, you cannot be fully present for someone else. But people still give emotional support in these moments, draining themselves further. Emotionally disciplined people say, "I want to give you my best, but I don't have it right now. Let me recover and then I can be here for you." This is not rejection. This is emotional honesty. Let's talk about conflict. Conflict can be one of the greatest emotional drainers in relationships. Most people handle conflict emotionally instead of logically. They attack, defend, escalate, withdraw, shut down, or hold grudges. All of this drains energy quickly. Emotionally disciplined people approach conflict differently. They stay calm, they stay grounded, they communicate without blaming, they focus on solutions instead of emotions. They acknowledge feelings but do not let those feelings dictate the conversation. They handle disagreements with emotional intelligence. This preserves energy and reduces emotional waste. Another emotional drain in relationships is tolerating emotional disrespect. When someone belittles you, dismisses your feelings, invalidates your experience, manipulates your emotions, or uses guilt to control you, your emotional energy drains instantly. Emotionally disciplined people do not tolerate disrespect. Their boundaries are firm, their standards are clear, they walk away from emotional manipulation, they protect their self-respect, they refuse to engage with emotional toxicity. Your emotional energy cannot coexist with emotional disrespect. Another invisible emotional cost is unreciprocated effort. When you give more than you receive, when you invest in someone who invests nothing in you, When you carry emotional weight for someone who won't carry even a feather for you, your emotional battery empties quickly. Emotionally disciplined people seek balanced connections. They understand that emotional investment must flow both ways. They do not chase people who walk away. They do not beg for attention, effort, or appreciation. They know that emotional imbalance is emotional bankruptcy. Another drain is emotional attachment to outcomes in relationships. When you tie your emotional state to how a relationship goes, how someone responds, or how someone treats you, you give away your emotional control. Emotionally disciplined people practice emotional independence. They feel deeply, but they don't hinge their peace on someone else's actions. They love without losing themselves. They care without collapsing. They stay connected without becoming dependent. They understand. Attachment without boundaries becomes emotional debt. Another major emotional drain is trying to fix people. Trying to rescue, repair, or reform someone is emotionally draining and rarely effective. People change only when they choose to. Emotional labor does not transform someone who does not want transformation. Emotionally disciplined people support, but they do not save. They guide, but they do not carry. They offer wisdom, not emotional sacrifice. They understand the difference between help and self-abandonment. Finally, let's talk about the emotional foundation of healthy relationships. Presence. Being present means showing up fully, without distraction, without emotional noise, without fear. Presence requires emotional energy. When you are emotionally scattered, you cannot be present. When you are emotionally calm, your presence becomes powerful. Emotionally disciplined people show up intentionally. They listen deeply, they speak truthfully, they connect meaningfully. Their presence is steady because their energy is steady. Healthy relationships thrive on emotional presence, not emotional pressure. This chapter teaches you the emotional truth of relationships. Connection should not cost you your peace. Love should not drain your energy. Support should not break your spirit. Caring should not collapse your boundaries. Fulfillment should not require emotional debt. Disciplined connections are rooted in emotional balance. They protect your energy. They honor your inner world. They strengthen your emotional wealth. Chapter 17. Purpose inside pain, how suffering becomes fuel instead of a drain. Pain enters every life, and rarely with permission. It shows up without warning. It pushes itself into your days, into your thoughts, into your body, into your routine. And the instinct is always the same: to fight it, to escape it, to numb it, to suppress it, to pretend it doesn't exist. But pain cannot be erased by emotional resistance. Pain becomes heavier when you push against it emotionally, and the emotional energy that gets wasted during this fight is enormous. You don't lose strength because of the pain itself. You lose strength because of the emotional spending you attach to it. Pain is an event. Suffering is what you add to the event. Emotional collapse is the result of fighting your own feelings. In this chapter, you will learn how to stop emotionally overspending when life hurts. How to stop letting pain drain you and instead let it direct you. How to transform emotional wounds into inner power. How to turn discomfort into clarity instead of chaos. Purpose is not something you find outside yourself. It is something you uncover inside your pain. Let us begin with the truth most people avoid. Pain is not an enemy. Pain is a messenger. Pain reveals something. Pain exposes something. Pain teaches something. Pain invites you to see what you have ignored. Pain pushes you to confront what you have delayed. Pain forces you to face what you have buried. But because people emotionally panic when pain arrives, they never hear the message. They feel the emotion and shut down. They feel the discomfort and resist. They feel the loss and collapse. They feel the uncertainty and overthink. They feel the confusion and try to control everything. Emotional resistance to pain is the greatest emotional drain there is. Your pain is not what exhausts you. Your emotional battle with pain is what leaves you empty. When you emotionally overspend on pain, you replay the event again and again. Question yourself endlessly. Tie your identity to the wound, anticipate future pain, judge yourself harshly, hold on to regret, mentally revisit memories, attach fear to the future, blame yourself or blame others, and spiral into emotional darkness. All of this is emotional debt. All of this drains your energy. All of this prevents you from using the pain as a source of direction. The moment you stop fighting pain emotionally, it becomes something else entirely. It becomes information. It becomes insight. It becomes clarity. It becomes strength. Pain becomes purpose the moment you stop emotionally resisting it. Let us understand emotional resistance more deeply. Emotional resistance is when you tell yourself the pain should not exist. You say, "This shouldn't have happened. This is unfair. This is wrong. Why me? Why now?" You question life. You question yourself. You fight the truth, but fighting pain doesn't heal it. Fighting pain strengthens it. Pain grows larger when you deny it. Pain becomes heavier when you refuse to accept it. Acceptance is not surrender. Acceptance is emotional conservation. Acceptance says, "It hurts, but I will not waste energy fighting the fact that it hurts." Acceptance says, "This is painful, but this is real." Acceptance says, "I do not have to emotionally collapse to acknowledge this." When you accept pain, you stop draining yourself emotionally. And when you stop draining yourself, you have energy left to use the pain instead of being crushed by it. Pain becomes purpose when you understand what it is pointing to. Every pain has a direction. A breakup reveals emotional wounds that need healing. Failure reveals weaknesses that require strength. Loss reveals what you valued most deeply. Loneliness reveals unmet needs. Disappointment reveals unrealistic expectations. Shame reveals areas where you seek approval. Uncertainty reveals the need for growth. Pain always reveals, but most people are too emotionally overwhelmed to look. To stop emotional overspending, you must allow yourself to feel pain without narrating it. The narration is what drains you. When something hurts, the mind immediately tells emotional stories. "This always happens to me. I'm not strong enough. I'll never recover. Things will never get better. People don't care. Life is unfair." These stories drain your emotional battery faster than the pain itself. If you remove the stories, the pain becomes manageable. Pain becomes a sensation instead of a life sentence. When pain loses its emotional story, it loses its emotional power. Another important truth: emotional wounds become deeper when you avoid them. Avoidance looks like distraction, denial, overworking, numbing behaviors, constant noise, emotional shutdown, or pretending to be fine. But emotional avoidance is not protection. It is slow, emotional suffocation. What you avoid drains you silently. What you face strengthens you quickly. Pain becomes purpose when you face it fully but without emotional self-destruction. You allow yourself to feel, but you don't attach a narrative of identity to it. You allow yourself to process, but you don't let it become your definition. You allow the pain to pass through you instead of letting it settle inside you. Let's talk about the transformation of pain. Pain can do one of two things: break you or shape you. The difference depends entirely on your emotional response. Pain breaks you when you react emotionally. Pain shapes you when you respond consciously. There is a profound difference between reacting and responding. Reaction is emotional spending. Response is emotional mastery. Reaction is impulsive, fearful, chaotic. Response is intentional, grounded, and controlled. Your emotional reaction to pain decides whether the pain becomes a weakness or a weapon. When emotionally fragile people experience pain, they collapse, blame themselves, blame the world, lose hope, and drain all their emotional energy. But emotionally disciplined people do something different. They step back. They breathe. They observe the pain without drowning in it. They ask, what is this pain trying to tell me? What truth is hidden here? What needs to change? What needs to heal? What needs to be released? What needs to be strengthened? They treat pain as information. They treat discomfort as guidance. They treat suffering as a signal. And because of this, pain becomes a turning point instead of an ending. Let us look at how pain becomes fuel. Emotional pain increases self-awareness. You learn what triggers you. You learn what wounds you carry. You learn what parts of you need support. Pain forces you to know yourself more deeply. Pain increases inner strength. When you survive something difficult, you grow. You develop resilience, patience, presence, and mental endurance. You realize you are stronger than you once believed. Pain increases gratitude. When you lose something or someone, you appreciate life differently. Gratitude becomes sharper. Love becomes deeper. Appreciation becomes clearer. Pain increases clarity. You see what matters and what doesn't. Pain strips life down to its essentials. Pain shows you what is real. Pain increases compassion. When you hurt, you understand the hurt of others. You stop judging. You start empathizing. You begin to treat others with kindness because you know what it feels like to struggle. Pain increases discipline. When life pushes you, you either crumble or correct. Pain pushes you into emotional responsibility. It demands that you take control of your reactions. It forces you to become intentional with your energy. Pain increases direction. Many people discover their path because of pain. Pain reveals what you cannot tolerate anymore. Pain highlights what your heart truly desires. Pain leads you toward growth. But for pain to become purpose, you must let it move. Pain stagnates when you hold it emotionally. Pain becomes toxic when you suppress it. Pain becomes exhausting when you resist it. The key to emotional discipline during suffering is flow. Let the emotion move through you without attaching a story to it. Let the tears fall without shame. Let the heaviness sit without fear. Let the sadness breathe without judgment. Let the confusion exist without panic. Emotions pass when you stop feeding them. They stay when you keep telling their story. Another important part of transforming pain into power is rebuilding your emotional boundaries with the past. Pain makes people revisit old wounds repeatedly. Every visit drains emotional energy, but emotionally disciplined people create boundaries around their memories. They say, "That happened, but I no longer live there. That hurt me, but it does not define me. That pain shaped me, but it does not control me." They allow the past to inform them, not imprison them. Now let's address something essential: the difference between healing and emotional spending. Healing is not emotional chaos. Healing is not overthinking. Healing is not reliving the wound forever. Healing is not drowning in emotions. Healing is slow, intentional, and steady. Healing is understanding, not emotional spiraling. Pain becomes purpose when you commit to healing consciously, without surrendering to emotional storms. The strongest people you know carry pain, but they carry it with discipline. They don't let it control their life. They don't let it drain their energy. They don't let it dictate their identity. They allow the pain to shape their depth, not their self-worth. This is where purpose is born, not from comfort, but from the lessons that only pain can teach. Chapter 18. The long game of emotional strength, patience as protection. In a world that worships speed, the slowest thing becomes the most powerful thing. Patience. Not passive patience, not waiting helplessly, not sitting without action, but disciplined patience, the kind that protects your emotional energy, strengthens your focus, and prevents you from draining yourself over things that unfold over time. One of the biggest sources of emotional overspending is impatience. People destroy their own peace because they expect growth to be fast, healing to be immediate, progress to be linear, relationships to be perfect, and success to be immediate. They emotionally overspend because they cannot handle waiting. Waiting feels like suffering when you lack emotional discipline. Impatience turns time into tension. Impatience turns progress into pressure. Impatience turns effort into frustration. Impatience turns uncertainty into fear. Impatience turns challenges into emotional storms. This chapter teaches you how to play the long game with your emotions, how to stop draining yourself by expecting instant results, and how to preserve your emotional energy by mastering the art of patient discipline. Sun Yun Wei. Let's begin with the truth. Emotional strength grows slowly. You cannot rush stability. You cannot accelerate wisdom. You cannot force clarity. Emotional maturity takes time, repetition, reflection, mistakes, and recovery. But most people emotionally collapse because they expect transformation to happen quickly. When it doesn't, they overspend emotionally. They tell themselves they're failing. They attack themselves for not progressing fast enough. They compare their growth to others. They panic when things take longer than expected. They drain emotional energy, resisting the natural pace of life. Patience protects energy because patience aligns you with reality. When you are patient, you stop emotionally fighting the timeline of life. You stop emotionally resisting the delays. You stop emotionally punishing yourself for slow progress. You stop emotionally magnifying setbacks. You save yourself from unnecessary emotional storms. Patience is emotional conservation. Let us look at how impatience creates emotional waste. Impatience makes you react instead of respond. You make decisions quickly to avoid discomfort. You rush into actions fueled by fear, not clarity. Rushed decisions drain emotional energy because they lead to emotional corrections later. Impatience makes you compare. When someone reaches a milestone before you, impatience tells you that you're behind, that something is wrong with you, that you must catch up quickly. This comparison drains emotional energy and creates unnecessary pressure. Impatience makes you doubt yourself. When results are slow, impatience attacks your identity. It tells you you're not capable, not progressing, not improving. This internal criticism drains your emotional battery faster than any external failure. Impatience makes you abandon good habits. You start something strong but quit when results don't show quickly. Your emotional energy gets wasted starting over again and again instead of being conserved through consistency. Impatience makes you fear the future. When you cannot tolerate slow progress, you imagine worst-case scenarios. Emotional energy then gets spent on imagining disasters that haven't happened. This emotional waste is preventable. Patience is the solution. Patience is calm strength. Patience is stability. Patience is emotional intelligence in motion. Patience is the refusal to emotionally collapse during slow seasons. Patience is the understanding that everything meaningful takes time. Look at nature. Trees grow slowly. Seasons shift gradually. Rivers carve rocks through patience. Even the strongest forces in nature work through time, not speed. Your emotional strength is no different. Let's explore the components of disciplined patience. The first component is acceptance. Acceptance does not mean giving up. It means understanding that everything has a timeline. You cannot rush healing. You cannot speed up progress. You cannot force clarity. When you accept the pace of life, you save emotional energy that would have been wasted resisting reality. Acceptance protects emotional energy because it eliminates unnecessary emotional tension. The second component is consistency. Consistency is the daily commitment that builds emotional strength slowly. Consistency is not glamorous. It is not dramatic. It is repetitive, steady, quiet. But it preserves emotional energy because it removes the emotional oscillations of starting and stopping. Consistency is the long game's greatest weapon. The third component is emotional detachment from outcomes. When you attach your emotional piece to results, you drain your energy. But when you detach emotionally and focus on effort, you conserve emotional power. You stop riding emotional highs and lows based on external events. You stay grounded. Detached patience is emotional stability. The fourth component is long-term thinking. Most emotional overspending happens because people think short-term. They want immediate gratification. They expect instant validation. They demand fast results. But long-term thinkers do not drain themselves emotionally because they understand the bigger picture. Long-term thinking saves emotional energy because it prevents emotional overreaction. The fifth component is flexibility. Life rarely moves in straight lines. You will experience detours, delays, surprises, and uncertainties. Rigid thinking leads to emotional exhaustion, but flexibility allows you to adapt without emotional collapse. Flexible patience is resilience in slow motion. The sixth component is internal pacing. Everyone has an emotional tempo. Some people need more time, some need less. When you discover your own pace, you stop comparing yourself to others. You stop draining emotional energy trying to match someone else's timeline. You grow according to your own rhythm. The seventh component is emotional endurance. Emotional endurance is the ability to sit with discomfort without panicking. It is the ability to feel uncertainty without spiraling. It is the ability to remain steady even when things are unclear. Endurance protects emotional energy by preventing emotional breakdowns during long stretches of effort. Let's talk about the long game mindset. The long game is rooted in something deeper than ambition. It is rooted in emotional wisdom. It recognizes that life does not reward speed. It rewards consistency, patience, and emotional stability. The long game says, I do not need results immediately. I am building something that will last. I trust the process even when I cannot see progress. I am willing to move slowly if it means moving strongly. The long game protects emotional energy because it removes pressure. Pressure is one of the biggest emotional drainers. When you stop pressuring yourself to perform instantly, you free emotional energy to perform effectively. Another key part of the long game is understanding the compound effect of small emotional choices. Every moment of patience, every pause, every calm decision, every emotionally disciplined reaction compounds over time. These small emotional savings build emotional wealth. The long game multiplies small emotional decisions into massive inner strength. Now let's explore the relationship between patience and emotional boundaries. Patience is not passive. Patience includes knowing what to tolerate and what to reject. Patience includes walking away from emotional drainers. Patience includes protecting your energy during long seasons of growth. Emotional patience requires emotional boundaries. You cannot play the long game if you are emotionally drained constantly. You cannot be patient when your emotional battery is empty. You cannot remain calm when your emotional environment is chaotic. This chapter teaches you that patience is not a personality trait. It is a skill. A skill that saves emotional energy. A skill that stabilizes your inner world. A skill that allows you to move through life with steady strength instead of emotional exhaustion. Patience is emotional discipline stretched across time. Another powerful truth. Impatience often comes from comparison. When you compare your journey to someone else's, you drain emotional energy instantly. You pressure yourself unnecessarily. You speed up your life emotionally. You treat your timeline like a race. Comparison is emotional bankruptcy. Emotionally disciplined people do not compare timelines. They focus on their own seasons. They protect their emotional energy by staying in their lane. Another essential truth. Impatience turns every delay into a crisis. Emotionally stable people see delays as part of the journey. They do not emotionally collapse when things take longer than expected. They conserve emotional energy by staying grounded instead of panicking. Now let's talk about emotional growth during slow seasons. Slow seasons teach patience. They force reflection. They reveal inner weaknesses. They expose rushed thinking. They develop endurance. Slow seasons are emotionally powerful because they strip away illusions. The long game teaches you that slow growth is real growth. Fast growth is unstable, it is dramatic, it burns emotional energy quickly, but slow, steady growth builds unshakable emotional strength. Patience is emotional investment. You invest emotional calmness now to receive emotional wealth later. You invest emotional control now to receive emotional stability later. You invest emotional discipline now to receive emotional freedom later. Impatience is emotional debt. You spend emotional energy now and pay the price later, through burnout, stress, regret, and emotional collapse. Lastly, patience creates emotional maturity. Emotional maturity is not about age, it is about how you respond to time. The emotionally mature understand that everything meaningful requires space. They do not drain themselves trying to speed up what must unfold slowly. They preserve emotional energy by respecting the natural pace of life. The long game of emotional strength is simple. Move slowly when needed, rest when needed, continue when required, pause without guilt, try again without shame, grow at your own pace, respect your own timeline, protect your emotional energy along the way. Patience is not waiting. Patience is emotional strategy. Chapter 19. Discipline as Freedom, the Paradox that Saves Your Energy. Most people think discipline is restriction. They think it is sacrifice. They think it is a loss of freedom. They believe discipline takes away comfort, convenience, and ease. Because of this misunderstanding, they emotionally resist discipline, avoid structure, fear routine, and sabotage their own stability. But the truth is the complete opposite. Discipline is freedom. Structure is freedom. Routine is freedom. Boundaries are freedom. Emotional control is freedom. The lack of discipline, emotional, mental, physical, creates chaos. And chaos is expensive. It drains emotional energy day after day. It creates stress, unpredictability, confusion, and regret. That emotional cost is far greater than the effort required to be disciplined. In this chapter, you will learn why discipline gives you more emotional energy, more peace, more control, more mental clarity, and more life. The world teaches you to chase motivation. Motivation is emotional. It fluctuates, it disappears, it burns out, it relies on feelings, but feelings are unstable. Discipline does not rely on feelings, it relies on decisions. Discipline is consistent when emotions are inconsistent. When you rely on motivation, you emotionally overspend. You force yourself to feel inspired. You pressure yourself to feel ready. You drain emotional energy waiting to feel like doing something. But when you rely on discipline, you act regardless of your emotional state. You conserve emotional energy because discipline removes emotional decision-making. Discipline saves emotional energy because it automates stability. Let's explore how discipline creates freedom. The first form of freedom discipline provides is emotional freedom. Emotional freedom comes from not being controlled by your impulses. When you are emotionally undisciplined, every feeling becomes a reaction. Every emotion becomes an event. Every discomfort becomes a problem. Every trigger becomes a distraction. You spend emotional energy managing your own emotional chaos. But when you are emotionally disciplined, you allow emotions to exist without obeying them. You pause instead of react. You respond instead of explode. You observe instead of drown. This emotional stability gives you freedom from emotional storms. Discipline frees you from yourself. The second form of freedom is mental freedom. Lack of discipline creates mental clutter, overthinking, indecision, procrastination, regret, avoidance. All of these drain mental energy every day. When you lack mental discipline, your thoughts run you. They scatter your attention. They lead you into emotional traps. They steal your peace. But mental discipline focuses your mind. It creates clarity. It strengthens your attention. It guides your thoughts instead of letting them wander. It prevents emotional spirals. It protects your mental battery. Discipline frees you from thought chaos. The third form of freedom is time freedom. Without discipline, time controls you. You rush, you delay, you procrastinate, you stress, you chase deadlines. You emotionally drain yourself trying to keep up with your own life. But discipline gives structure to your time. You create routines. You set priorities. You complete tasks earlier. You stay calm. You use time intentionally instead of reacting to it emotionally. This reduces stress and increases your capacity. Discipline frees you from time pressure. The fourth form of freedom is relational freedom. When you lack emotional discipline in relationships, you say yes when you want to say no. You avoid conflict, you seek approval, you over-explain, you overgive, you chase validation. All of this drains emotional energy and leads to resentment. But relational discipline teaches boundaries. You protect your time, you protect your peace. You communicate clearly, you avoid emotionally draining people. You choose healthy connections. You maintain your identity inside relationships. Discipline frees you from emotional dependency. The fifth form of freedom is freedom from regret. Lack of discipline leads to decisions made out of impulse, fear, laziness, or emotional chaos. Those decisions lead to regret, guilt, and self-blame, all of which drain emotional energy for months or years. But discipline leads to decisions made from clarity. You create actions that match your values. You behave in alignment with who you want to become. You make choices you can respect. Discipline frees you from regret. The sixth freedom is freedom from overwhelm. Emotional overspending happens when everything feels urgent, everything feels important, everything feels intense. Without discipline, your mind gets overwhelmed easily. You cannot prioritize. You cannot focus. You cannot stay calm. Discipline organizes your life. It gives every part of your day a place. It does not demand perfection, it demands structure. With structure, overwhelm fades. With structure, chaos disappears. With structure, peace emerges. Discipline frees you from mental overload. The seventh freedom is future freedom. Without discipline, you repeat the same cycles. You stay stuck in the same habits. You fall into the same emotional traps. You waste emotional energy on the same mistakes. But discipline breaks cycles. It forces growth. It pushes you beyond old patterns. It moves you closer to the life you want. It builds habits that support your future instead of consuming your present. Discipline frees you from repeating your past. Now let's understand why discipline reduces emotional overspending. When you lack discipline, everything requires emotional force. You must emotionally push yourself to get out of bed, emotionally push yourself to work, emotionally push yourself to start tasks, emotionally push yourself to stay consistent. This emotional pushing drains energy quickly. Discipline eliminates pushing. Discipline creates habits. Habit eliminates emotional decisions. And eliminating emotional decisions conserves emotional energy. When your habits run your life, your emotions don't have to. When your discipline guides you, your feelings no longer drain you. When your structure supports you, your energy remains strong. Another emotional cost of undisciplined living is unpredictability. When your days lack structure, you feel overwhelmed. You feel behind, you feel scattered. You feel mentally unstable. All of this drains emotional energy. Discipline stabilizes your inner world. It creates predictability. It creates rhythm. It creates emotional consistency. When your life becomes predictable, your emotions calm down. When your emotions calm down, your energy increases. Discipline doesn't restrict you, it releases you. We must also talk about micro-discipline. Emotional discipline is built in small decisions, not big ones. The decision to not react instantly, the decision to take a breath, the decision to step away, the decision to sleep instead of scroll, the decision to say no, the decision to avoid emotional drama, the decision to set a boundary. These small acts create emotional strength over time. Micro-discipline conserves emotional energy in every moment. Another important element is self-respect. Discipline increases self-respect because each disciplined action proves something to you. I am capable of controlling myself. Every action aligned with discipline strengthens your identity. Every action aligned with discipline protects your emotional energy from self-doubt. Discipline builds confidence slowly but permanently. Let's talk about how discipline creates emotional peace. When you are disciplined, you trust yourself, you trust your routines, you trust your decisions, you trust your boundaries, you trust your future. This self-trust eliminates emotional panic. Panic drains energy. Trust saves it. Discipline is emotional trust. Another essential truth. Discipline eliminates drama. Emotional drama thrives where discipline is absent. Drama requires reaction, weakness, inconsistency, insecurity, and emotional chaos. But discipline eliminates those environments. Discipline removes the space where drama grows. Discipline is emotional protection. Finally, discipline gives you freedom from yourself. The untrained self is chaotic, impulsive, reactive, and emotionally unpredictable. The disciplined self is grounded, steady, calm, and consistent. Discipline turns your mind into a safe place. Discipline turns your emotions into allies. Discipline turns your habits into support. Discipline turns your life into something you can control. This is the paradox of discipline. The more discipline you build, the more freedom you feel. The more freedom you feel, the less emotional energy you waste. The less emotional energy you waste, the more power you gain. The more power you gain, the stronger your life becomes. Discipline is not a cage. Discipline is a shield. Discipline is a foundation. Discipline is emotional luxury. Discipline is the doorway to inner freedom. Chapter 20. Commanding your inner world, becoming the leader of your emotions. There comes a point in every person's life where they must decide who is in charge, their emotions or their mind, their impulses or their principles, their reactions or their decisions, their momentary feelings or their long-term direction. Most people never make this decision consciously. They move through life believing emotions are the true leaders, and they follow them, sometimes blindly, often painfully, and always expensively. This chapter is about becoming your own commander, the person who leads your emotions instead of being led by them. It is about taking ownership of your internal world, reclaiming power that was scattered, and stepping into a version of yourself that does not collapse at the first sign of emotional discomfort. To become your own commander, you must understand something crucial. Your emotional world is not an enemy. It is a kingdom. And a kingdom without leadership falls into chaos. A kingdom without order collapses. A kingdom without direction is vulnerable. Your emotions are powerful forces, but they require structure, guidance, and authority. You are that authority. Becoming your own commander does not mean suppressing emotions. It means organizing them. It means guiding them. It means listening without obeying blindly. It means directing them toward growth instead of destruction. It means understanding that emotions are messengers, not masters. The strongest people in the world are not those who feel nothing. They are those who feel deeply, but stay in control. Let's begin with the foundation: internal authority. Internal authority is the ability to guide your emotional reactions with wisdom instead of impulse. When you have internal authority, you do not collapse when things go wrong. You do not overreact when emotions spike. You do not drain yourself trying to regain control after an emotional storm. Internal authority creates emotional security. The first step in becoming your own commander is noticing your emotional triggers. Triggers are not weaknesses, they are signals. They reveal what needs healing, what needs boundaries, what needs clarity. Instead of letting triggers lead you into emotional overspending, you learn to anticipate them. You learn to understand their patterns. You learn to prepare for them. Commanders do not get ambushed, they observe the battlefield. The second step is emotional separation. Emotional separation means recognizing the distance between you and your emotions. You experience emotions, but you are not your emotions. You feel anger, but you are not anger. You feel sadness, but you are not sadness. You feel fear, but you are not fear. You feel insecurity, but you are not insecurity. Commanders do not confuse themselves with their soldiers. When you emotionally separate, you create space to respond instead of react. You conserve emotional energy because you no longer feel controlled by intense sensations. The third step is internal command language. The language you use inside your mind is the tone your emotions follow. If your internal voice is chaotic, emotional, panicked, or self-destructive, your emotions respond in the same direction. But if your internal voice is calm, authoritative, and clear, your emotions soften. Your internal voice must speak like a leader, firm, steady, rational, composed. Instead of, "I can't handle this," your internal commander says, "I can handle this moment." Instead of, "This is too much," your internal commander says, "I will manage one step at a time." Instead of, "I'm losing control," your internal commander says, "I am in control of my response." Instead of, "Everything is falling apart," your internal commander says, "I will stabilize this situation." This language conserves emotional energy. It directs your emotions instead of letting them direct you. The fourth step is emotional accountability. Becoming your own commander means taking responsibility for your emotional reactions. It means owning your responses instead of blaming others. It means saying, "My reactions belong to me. My emotions belong to me. My behavior belongs to me." Emotional accountability is not self-blame. It is self-power. When you hold yourself accountable, you stop emotionally overspending on excuses, justifications, and self-criticism. You redirect energy towards solutions. The fifth step is emotional standards. People with no emotional standards accept any emotional impulse. They allow their emotions to dictate their behavior. They allow their moods to control their day. They allow their fears to shape their choices. They allow their wounds to determine their relationships. But emotional standards set the rules. Standards say, "I do not react instantly. I do not speak from anger. I do not make decisions from fear. I do not chase validation. I do not collapse under pressure. I do not accept disrespect. I do not emotionally invest in everything." Commanders do not live without rules. They follow principles. The sixth step is emotional discipline. Emotional discipline means training yourself to respond with reason instead of impulse. It means practicing calmness daily. It means observing emotions before acting on them. It means adjusting your emotional reactions through habit. Discipline is what turns emotional chaos into emotional control. The seventh step is internal direction. A commander always knows where they are going. Emotional spending is highest when you lack direction because emotions fill the empty space. But when you have purpose, goals, clarity, and priorities, emotions have less room to wander. Direction reduces emotional noise. Internal direction means reminding yourself daily what matters and what doesn't. It means aligning your emotions with your values. It means guiding your emotional energy towards the future instead of the past. It means staying focused when distractions appear. The eighth step is emotional neutrality. Emotional neutrality does not mean being emotionless. It means being neutral towards small things so you can save your energy for big things. It means not reacting to every opinion, not attaching to every emotion, not getting pulled into every conversation, not surrendering emotional power to minor issues. Neutrality is emotional wealth. Small emotional reactions accumulate quickly. Neutrality prevents unnecessary emotional spending. It keeps your emotional battery full for what actually matters. The ninth step is emotional reinforcement. Commanders train their troops regularly. You must train your emotional habits regularly. Reinforcement happens through routines, repetition, and practice. You strengthen emotional habits the same way you strengthen physical habits, through consistency. Reinforcement creates emotional reliability. Reliability creates stability. Stability creates freedom. The 10th step is visualization. Visualization is not about imagining success. It is about imagining emotional control. You picture yourself staying calm in difficult situations. You imagine yourself speaking with clarity. You imagine yourself handling stress with composure. You imagine yourself conserving emotional energy. When the moment actually arrives, your emotional system responds exactly as you trained it. Visualization is emotional simulation. The 11th step is forgiveness, not for others, but for yourself. Commanders do not waste emotional energy punishing themselves for mistakes. They learn, adjust, and move forward. Emotional self-forgiveness is essential because guilt, regret, and self-blame are emotional debt. Forgiveness saves emotional resources. The 12th step is emotional independence. Emotional independence means no longer tying your internal world to external approval. It means you don't collapse emotionally when someone rejects you, criticizes you, or misunderstands you. Emotional independence protects your energy from being controlled by others. Independence puts you back in command. The 13th step is reflection. A commander reviews every battle, not emotionally, but analytically. You reflect on your emotional reactions throughout the day. You observe patterns. You notice triggers. You adjust your strategies. Reflection turns experience into wisdom. Now let's talk about what happens when you fully become your own commander. Your emotions stop overpowering you. Your reactions become thoughtful. Your mind stays calm under pressure. Your boundaries become unbreakable. Your confidence grows naturally. Your decisions become clearer. Your emotional spending drops dramatically. Your energy becomes protected. Your presence becomes strong. People will notice the difference, not because you become cold or distant, but because you become grounded and steady. You carry yourself differently. You handle life differently. You no longer look for emotional permission from others. You no longer seek validation. You no longer panic at uncertainty. You lead your emotions, and they follow your command. This is the final transformation of emotional discipline. You stop being a follower of your emotions and become the commander of your inner world. Final outro, the closing reflection. You've reached the end of this audiobook, but not the end of your journey. What you've learned here is not just a set of ideas. It is a new way of moving through life, a new way of interacting with your emotions, your energy, your relationships, your decisions, your habits, and your entire inner world. This audiobook has been about one central truth. Emotional energy is your most valuable resource. Not time, not talent, not motivation. Emotional energy. Everything you do, every decision, every reaction, every intention is powered by this inner resource. And when it is spent carelessly, life feels heavy, overwhelming, and chaotic. But when it is invested wisely, life becomes lighter, calmer, clearer, and far more powerful. You have learned that emotional spending happens silently, in small reactions, in tiny choices, in unconscious habits, in draining conversations, in emotional responsibility that does not belong to you, in overthinking and self-criticism, in impatience and comparison, in every moment where you allow emotions to lead without discipline. But you've also learned the opposite: emotional saving, emotional stability, emotional mastery, the ability to create calm inside yourself even when life is loud outside. You've learned how to set boundaries, how to detach, how to choose where your energy flows, how to protect your inner world, and how to walk away from anything that drains your emotional strength. Every chapter has built a piece of your new foundation. You learned the importance of conserving emotional power instead of spending it impulsively. You learned that discipline creates freedom, not restriction. That structure protects peace, not hinders it. That patience strengthens your energy instead of draining it. That pain becomes purpose when you stop fighting it emotionally. You learned that relationships can either weaken you or elevate you depending on your boundaries. That emotional independence frees you from relying on others to regulate your inner world. That long-term thinking reduces emotional panic. That systems protect you when motivation fades. Most importantly, you learn that becoming your own commander is not about control, it's about direction. You now understand that emotions are not meant to be suppressed or ignored. They are meant to be led, guided, understood, organized, channeled. When you lead your emotions, you save massive amounts of energy that used to be wasted on chaos, unpredictability, and emotional storms. You now know that your emotional energy determines the quality of your life, and you have every tool you need to protect it, strengthen it, and invest it into the things that actually matter. As you walk forward from this audiobook, remember this: your peace is not a luxury, it is a necessity. Your emotional energy is not infinite, it must be protected. Your attention is not free, it must be directed. Your inner world is not a battlefield. It is a kingdom, an issue, and you are its leader, issue. Your life will change the moment you take full ownership of that role. Thank you for spending your time and emotional presence with this audiobook. If this journey added value, clarity, strength, or direction to your life, then help this message reach others by subscribing to Prestige Audiobooks. Your support allows more people to find the tools they need to protect their peace and take command of their inner world. New audiobooks, new topics, new emotional transformations, delivered every day. Subscribe, like, comment, and share so that these lessons can reach someone who needs them. And as we close this audiobook, carry this final reminder with you. Discipline is not punishment. Emotional control is not coldness. Stability is not weakness. They are forms of freedom, the kind that creates a life you can finally call your own. The journey continues from here.